I'm a female, and the story happened when I was about 17 to 18 years old. I can't remember exactly what age, but it was around then. My best friend and I used to really like going downtown for dinner on the weekends. Not to drink, we weren't into that, but we just like to go out together, as the ambience of the downtown area where we live is really nice. We usually would park the car next to a church and make the walk down to whatever restaurant we chose to eat at. I never did like doing this, as I wasn't ever an athletic person, and the walk went down a few hills, which meant we would have to hike uphill after eating to get back to the car, which is never a good combination. But we parked where we did because parking was limited downtown unless it wasn't busy or you liked parallel parking, which not many people do. Anyways, we started our walk down to an Italian restaurant that we often frequented. Walking down the hills and through the streets, which always puts us on edge anyways, being it was downtown since it was usually dark or dusk out whenever we would start walking. So we got about 5 minutes away from the restaurant when we get to a pretty secluded road where not many people were walking on, and it pretty much was just sidewalk and road, and there's a car next to us with someone in it. We couldn't tell who it was or the gender, as we were too far away at this point, but I always got scared walking towards occupied cars for some reason. As we got closer, I could see it was an older man, probably mid-50s. He looked at us and kind of smirked as we passed, which was really weird as I was around 5'3" at the time, and my best friend was 5'1", so we were obviously much smaller than him. My best friend grabbed my arm as we both felt the weird energy from him, and we started walking faster away. I guess he noticed this, and we then both heard his door open and then quickly close. He started walking behind us with that stupid grin on his face, exactly like he had in the car, so naturally we sped up again. He didn't like this. He started running after us, and we started running away from him even faster. Like I said, there wasn't that many people on this street, so we started taking turns to get to a street that was much more populated and had businesses on it. He followed us every turn we made while running. I had started to lose stamina to keep running, as like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't very athletic at the time, and he then approached me very fast now. My best friend grabbed me once again, and finally we had reached a street that was more populated. He simply turned around and began walking back to his car, seeing that there were people here. This scared us a lot, because whatever he wanted with us, clearly he didn't want to do in front of other people, which is really creepy. Thinking back, he also didn't lock his doors, which you had to do parking downtown where I live, as there was a lot of car robberies there, which also indicates to me that he wanted us to get into the car. It really scares me to think what he would have done to us if we hadn't gotten away, but we did, and we had a damn good dinner that night too. My best friend and I joined boxing classes after this incident, and I'm much more confident that if we were put in this situation again, we would be way more prepared to throw in a punch or two if need be, but let's hope that it never comes to that. This happened when I was about 13. I'm 22 now. I'm a female, by the way. When I was growing up, it was just my mom and I for the most part. My dad wasn't really involved. Sometimes he would send support checks from his job in a different country. Anyways, my mom took house sitting and cleaning jobs when she could, and I would often go with her. When we weren't traveling, we had stayed at our small apartment. We were in Georgia when this happened. We had gotten a call from this older lady asking us to come by and clean the house a couple of times while she and her granddaughter were away on a trip. As usual, we had grabbed our cleaning stuff and got in our car, then drove to the address we were given. It was a pretty nice home, 2 stories and multiple bedrooms. The house was on a backcountry road, the closest neighbors being a few acres away on either side with the forest behind the house. The yard was well maintained and decorated. My mom and I realized that cleaning this house would take longer than we thought. It was already in the evening, so we'd be here after dark. We grabbed the hidden key from the logbox that the old lady told us about and then went inside, taking our cleaning supplies with us. Usually I would work on homework while she cleaned, but on that day I decided to help her clean so we wouldn't be there too late. I remember the house was pretty nice, and despite having a number of spare rooms, it looked like the only ones who lived there were the old lady and her granddaughter, who, judging from her bedroom and the photos around the house, was about my age. We were a couple of hours into the cleaning when my mom and I both heard a door shut downstairs. It had gotten dark, and we were in an upstairs room with a bathroom when we heard the door shut. We both froze and looked at each other. I remember my mom had a look of confusion on her face. "Did you shut and lock the door?" she asked, and I felt my blood run cold. I knew I had shut it, but I couldn't remember if I'd locked it. We stayed silent for a moment, listening for any other sounds. Something felt wrong. Maybe it was the wind that shut the door, but I could swear something felt bad. It was really quiet for what seemed like forever, and we just decided to blame it on the wind. Then a man's voice called from downstairs. "Savannah? Where are you?" he shouted, and we could hear his heavy footsteps start moving from room to room downstairs. I remember my mom looking startled. We stared at each other in silence. "Savannah, it's Daddy! Where are you?" I heard him call again. His voice sounded almost a bit frantic, and I could hear his footsteps getting louder as he started slamming doors downstairs. I remember seeing the name Savannah monogrammed on a few things in the granddaughter's room from earlier. My mom grabbed my arm and pulled me over to the bathroom that was connected to the bedroom we were in. She shut the bedroom door and locked it before coming over to the bathroom and grabbing her phone. She crouched on the floor beside me and started dialing the police. I remember how scared I felt when she told me that the old lady had said that no one else lived at the house. Part of me thought to just tell them that Savannah and her grandma weren't there, and that it was just us to clean the place. But my gut told me that would be a big mistake. My mom was struggling to get through to the police. She had a crappy old flip phone at the time, and there wasn't much signal where we were. She did manage to get a hold of them though. And while she was explaining the situation to them, the man searching became more angry and frantic. We could hear him going from room to room, slamming doors and opening closets. When he finally got to our bedroom, he jiggled the doorknob angrily before shouting Savannah's name and slamming his fist into the door. My mom kept talking with the police, the dispatcher telling her that the police were on their way and to stay put. I was just frozen in the back corner of the bathroom, starting to tear up as I was scared. At some point, I had shouted, "Go away!" as I cried, but that only made him even more frantic, kicking the door hard as he kept shouting Savannah's name. I could hear the wood starting to splinter as my mom switched from shouting at the man that Savannah wasn't here and that we were just a cleaning service and then begging the police to hurry. It seemed like forever, but the sounds of the sirens and the flashing lights outside told us that the police were here now. We could hear the police fighting with the man and arresting him through the door. He wasn't listening to them. They had to tackle him and pin him down while they handcuffed him and then dragged him screaming away from the door. I ended up having a panic attack afterwards, and I don't really remember much about my interview with the police, but I ended up finding out what happened. My mom later told me that the old lady and her granddaughter had left on the trip due to concern over the granddaughter's biological dad making threats and expressing violent anger at the change in the custody agreement, which put her living with her grandma and then him on a no-contact order with his daughter. The old lady had neglected to tell us that there was a potential of him showing up to her house, and the fact that the man had become so obsessed with taking his daughter back. When he heard me screaming, he assumed I was her, and he lost it. He very clearly had something wrong with him. I really hope that he got the help he needed and that Savannah was safe, but I still have issues with men if they ever shout or raise their voice near me, whatever the reason. My own mom remarried later on, and we're in a much better place out west now. Even almost 10 years later, it still messes with me. and part of me wonders what he would have done had he managed to break down that door. I work in a tiny clothing store in the UK, and a couple of days ago I had the worst encounter with a customer that I've ever had. Just bear with me because I know how it all sounds typed out. I'm a 19-year-old female. I was operating the tills and my manager was in his office working. My other coworkers were on the shop floor doing what they gotta do. A younger lady came in. She was probably in her early to mid-30s. She was smartly dressed and I smiled at her, but she ignored me. No big deal. She walked around the store for a while before marching over to me with an aggressive expression. She was holding a polo neck top, and she had asked in a demanding tone where the changing room was. I told her and I pointed in the direction of it, and one of my other coworkers heard the encounter and then rushed over to guide the woman over there. Great, an annoying customer, I thought to myself as she marched off. The shop was quiet, so I only served one person while the moody lady was gone. Well, she came back and she still looked annoyed. I was dreading it, but I knew I had to interact with her. She stormed over to me and she asked me if we would wash and dry clean the polo neck before she bought it. I was truly dumbfounded and then told her, no, we're a shop. I politely informed her that we have a laundrette down the street if she'd like to hand in clothing for that service. I know that this sounds like bullshit, but she literally took a deep breath before proceeding to scream at the top of her lungs. She was screaming in that way where your voice breaks and sounds very rough, like she was choking on gravel almost. She screamed that she hadn't asked me if there was a laundrette down the street. She asked me if we would do it for her in the store. Now, I may be young, but I'm not a pushover. My friends would always joke that I'm the kind of girl who would knock out a 6'5" bodybuilding man if he tried to harass me. Everyone in the store stopped to stare in shock, and I didn't know it at the time, but my boss was walking out of his office. I raised my voice slightly, and I told her she needed to calm down and lower her tone. She continued screaming at me, telling me I was a little girl who had no business telling her what to do, and that I ought to respect my elders. I raised my voice more, and I told her to leave the polo neck on the counter and to leave the premises. She then proceeded to throw the polo neck right at me, hanger and all. It took everything in me to not jump over the counter and rip her damn hair out, but I somehow managed to keep calm as I held on to the polo neck. I shouted at her, this time quite aggressively, and I told her to leave the premises immediately and that I was calling the police to have her arrested for assault. It was right then that my boss came out, and he started shouting at the woman, telling her to leave now, and he was calling the police. He told her that she was banned indefinitely for assaulting his staff, and the woman then turned to him. My boss had glasses, and she then screamed at him. "Oh yeah? Really? Why don't you shut the fuck up, you specky-looking bastard? I don't gotta listen to you." The situation was so insane that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was like every meme of a rude customer brought to life, every stereotype. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. My boss held his own, and he told the woman to leave now, and he walked towards her. When he did this, she had started shouting that he better keep his hands to himself, and that she was disgusted with our shop for selling horrible merchandise. I looked down at the polo neck, and there was literally nothing wrong with it. If it had rumples, that was her own fault for throwing it around. She literally came in the store with an attitude, and she entered wanting to start a fight. My boss said loudly that he was away to call the police. And with that, the woman growled like some sort of entity and then stormed out of the shop. People in the street were gawping at her. People came in to ask what the fuck was going on, and we spent like half an hour just telling random people off the street what just went down. People who came in had bought things, and they also told me how I handled it so well. My boss and other coworkers said the same thing, and my boss thanked us all for staying cool in the situation. He did end up calling the police, and he gave them the CCTV footage of the woman. I don't know whatever came of it because we've not had any updates. They can't really do much though. She only screamed and threw some fabric at me. Still though, it was the most unhinged encounter I had ever had in my whole life. Hopefully it's the last unhinged one too. Christmas really brings out the worst in some shoppers. This happened to me earlier today, and it's still very fresh in my mind. It was Friday afternoon, and I'm a university student. I don't live on campus, so after my class, I was going to a supermarket to literally get 2 items. Then I was visiting a friend. You could leave the supermarket via the parking lot or via going into the street, if that makes sense. Anyway, I exited into the street and began walking up towards the traffic lights. As I was walking, there was a group of about 6 or 7 young guys standing there. I don't know why, but I got a bad feeling in my gut. I know that some people might say that I was being paranoid, but your gut instinct is never wrong, and I'd rather be paranoid than take a risk on my life. The guys looked at me, and I sort of darted to the side so that I wasn't hidden, but not as visible due to a parked car being in front of me. I also had wired headphones in, with one bud out so I could still hear. I decided to take them out completely though, and I noticed a text from my mom as I did this. She texted me saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Which was very random. She never texted me things like that. I then called her and I asked her about the text, and she told me she just had the urge to send it for some reason. I proceeded to tell her about the guys, and I said I had a weird feeling. She told me I'd be okay and to just go to the traffic lights because we were in a safe area and that I would be okay. I hesitated, and I kept looking at the guys, who now were all looking at me. I told her I was thinking about walking a longer route to my friend's house, but I wasn't sure because it would take me like 30 minutes instead of the usual 20 to get to her place. My mom told me that she was trying to make me feel better and she would stay on the phone with me, but to do what I felt safest doing. I told her I would take the long route, and she said okay and to stay on the phone. She asked me if I was walking after a minute of silence, and I said yes. I then suddenly heard loud talking, and I turned around to see the men were all following me. They were probably between the ages of 20 to 25. I had a bad feeling about this too, but part of me thought that maybe I was just being ridiculous. I mean, it's not a crime to walk behind me. Still, I decided I'd walk to the supermarket again since there were people there. There's also a bus stop there, and I could see 3 men and a woman sitting in it. The supermarket also had customers exiting. As I approached, I walked right up to the bus stop and got inside of it. Then I turned around. As soon as the men saw I was standing next to the 3 men, they literally started running away. I mean, running fast up the hilly pavement and then disappearing. I told my mom and she seemed concerned, but was trying not to make me feel nervous. I told her I was thinking about just coming home instead of going to my friend's house, and she told me again to do what I felt comfortable doing. She asked me where the men were at now, but I said I didn't know. She then suggested that I walk slowly and then see if I could see them up near the traffic lights again, which I did, but I couldn't see them. However, I was still nervous. I mean, what if they were lurking somewhere and I bumped into them later? To get to my friend's house, I have to walk through a street that is very secluded, and I didn't feel safe doing that. There's a taxi rank in the supermarket, and one of our family friends actually works as a taxi driver. I happened to notice he was in the rank, which I mentioned to my mom, and I said I was thinking about just jumping in his cab and going home. She told me to just do that and to let my friend know what happened. That's what I did, and I went home. I called my friend and explained everything, and she told me I did the right thing. Now, I don't really know if I overreacted, but like I said, I'd rather seem paranoid than ignore my gut instinct and end up in trouble. I'm a 20-something-year-old female, and yeah, not all men are creepy, but these guys were really acting suspiciously. I've walked past large groups of guys before and had no bad feelings. I've stood at traffic lights with men, and again, no bad feelings at all. But these guys, they just seemed off to me. Why did they start running up the road when they saw I was standing near 3 guys at the bus stop? Why were they just standing at the traffic lights staring at me? It's the walking behind me then running away that gets me. And once again, I was reminded of the importance of never ignoring your gut instinct. No matter how insane or paranoid you might think you're being to the outside observer, ignore that worry. Never ignore your gut instincts, because somehow it's always correct. If I walked to those traffic lights, something could have happened. I don't know what they were up to, but something tells me that it wasn't good. Stay safe, everyone. So this happened a long time ago, but I've never forgotten it, as it's one of the strangest encounters me and my family have ever had. One time as a child, I'd went with my family to the grocery store. It was our monthly trip to stock up on groceries, so we were going to be there for a while. I was about 12 at the time, so by that age, I had a good understanding of how to read people. We started in the produce aisle, and suddenly a strange man caught my eye. He was standing awkwardly close to us, sort of fake browsing the vegetables. His body language just seemed off. He was standing with his back to us, but there was something strange about the way he was positioned. As we slowly moved down the aisle, he would slowly rotate so his back was always facing us. As we got a little closer, I could tell he was wearing those see-behind glasses. Those gimmick sunglasses that have hidden mirrors on the inside of the lenses so you can see behind yourself. He had a dirty gray zip-up jacket on and long, dark, messy hair. He had to be in his 40s. Our shopping went on, and wherever we went, I would see him standing there staring at me from across the store. He would keep his distance from us, but he was always within eyesight no matter where we were in the store. About 30 minutes in, my mom still hadn't noticed it, but he was starting to really creep me out. My mom didn't believe me at first. Eventually, we got to the refrigerator aisles, and this is when it got weird. Whatever aisle we were in, he would quickly pace past us occasionally. At this point, he wasn't even trying to look like he was shopping. My mom and sis were starting to notice this, and also seemed concerned. At this point, we were grabbing something off one of the shelves, and I could see him just standing on the opposite aisle, peeking through the shelves at us. His sunglasses were still on, but now his hood was fully up. We started to walk faster and do some random zigzags around the store just to see if he really was following us and to try and lose him, but he would always keep up, all in a sneaky way at that. He would always be at the opposite end of the aisle, but he kept up with us the whole time. By this point, my mom was concerned, so we pushed the cart up to the customer service area to talk to a manager about it. By this time, we had lost him. We informed the manager, and she was honestly very helpful. She actually went to go find the guy and go talk to him. We waited at the counter until she paced back to us with a confused look on her face. She walked up to my mother and then told us, "He said that you're his mom." By this point, my mom and sister were very concerned. The manager rang us up and said we should leave and that they'll escort out the strange man. We walked out to the car, staying very close to our mother, when we were then met with a horrible sight. It was the man, just standing across the parking lot across from our car, with his head slightly tilted, and a big sick grin on his face. We flirted out of there, but we could still just see him standing there, watching us leave. Whoever that guy was in the creepy sunglasses. Yeah, I never want to see him again. I was around 11 at the time, and I was at my sister's ringette game. It's an ice sport for those who don't know, and she was 14 at the time. My mom had also driven my sister's friend Tara and her dad Daniel to the game. When the game had finished, it was dark out, and we were all walking back to our car. This was an ice rink, so the parking lot was big, and we were parked far away. So that you can understand it better, we were walking in groups. My mom walking beside Daniel, my sister right behind them walking beside Tara, and then me walking right behind them alone. There was this middle-aged man that I had briefly seen when we were entering walking around. I wasn't startled since I thought he was just another parent from the other team. He was right behind me, and I was going a little slow, so I had moved off to the side for him to pass. He then started walking very slow in front of me, so I passed him to catch up with my mom. He then did this a few more times, and that's when I thought that it was really weird. My sister had also noticed this, but she hadn't seen the whole thing, so she was just keeping an eye out. The man followed us, continuing to slow walk in front of me all the way to our car. There were no cars around us, so him going to his own car was now ruled out. I got in the car, and my mom and Daniel did too. My sister and Tara were putting their bags in the trunk. Picture a big hockey bag. The man had started talking to them, and my mom noticed this. So she slammed open her door and ran to the back of the car, Daniel not too far behind. The man wandered off after she saw this, and my mom then asked what he had said. Tara said that he was just standing next to the trunk, not even saying anything. So Tara, like the extroverted person she is, asked if he needed something. She said the man just grumbled to himself, and she couldn't even make out what he had said. That's pretty much it. Nothing else happened, but this was still a pretty creepy story for us young girls, as we had no idea why the man was following us or what his intentions were. I assume he was just on drugs and out of it. And if you're wondering, no, he didn't actually appear homeless. So yeah, we have no idea what his actual intentions were. It was a July evening. My friends Tony and Susan and I had went outside for a smoke. No, we don't smoke that often, but we had had a bad day today, and we just wanted to. Now, as we walked outside, we had noticed a car that was parked outside. We kept a close eye on the car while we had lit up our 3 cigarettes. Susan was right in the middle of lighting hers when she saw the door to the car then swing open. We then froze, as we then saw a man dressed in a brown coat, wearing a top hat with a black tie that had white dots on it. He was dressed very similar to H.H. Holmes back in the day. Anyhow, he walked right up to us. We were frozen in fear as the man smiled and then said in a sinister way, "I won't hurt you. Well, unless you make me." We all 3 gulped and we all ran to my house. We slammed the door shut as soon as we got inside and locked it. Suddenly we then heard 3 loud knocks on the door. "I know you're in there, guys. There's no reason to hide." Suddenly we heard silence and what sounded like the loading of a gun. We were frozen as the man started to laugh from the outside. We heard the laughter go on for what seemed like hours, but in reality was only minutes. Tony then dialed 911. Luckily the police weren't very far away, as very soon after, we saw the blue and red lights and sirens then approaching. We all then jumped, as the sound of a gun blast could then be heard, with one of the windows then shattering. We heard the police rush the guy, and he was arrested. When my parents came home, they saw that we were really scared. They told us they were sorry that they weren't there when it happened, and that they heard the news from one of our local sheriffs. Now, my father is a known judge in the area, and he's put away a lot of scum behind bars. Well, this so happened to be one of the men he had actually put away. The man was so far gone that the first thing he did after getting released from jail was to borrow a shotgun from his friend and then come to our house. Despite being drunk, the man had the intention to kill us. In fact, him being drunk may be the only thing that actually saved us that night. The man is now luckily back in jail where he'll spend the next 10 to 20 years behind bars. I honestly think he needs to be there for life after what he did, but I don't control the justice system, so I guess I'll take it. I'm now a 45-year-old husband and a father of 2 sons, ages 13 and 6. I've lived in Brooklyn, New York my whole life, pretty much in the same neighborhood actually. This started when I was 10 years old, and I've never uttered a single word of this to anyone. Listening to your channel has made me want others to see if they're ever in the same situation, how not to handle things. So it was a different time back then. No internet, no cell phones, yet us kids had more freedom than kids these days, and for good reason I believe. So one day, a man came around my block. His name was Chris, and he was actually a pretty decent guy, and he was looking for people to deliver the newspaper locally. So being a 10-year-old whose family struggled for every dollar thanks to a father's serious gambling addiction, I thought this could be a great way to finally afford things that the other kids had, and kind of made fun of me about. Well, a few weeks in, it was a warm morning. I started out at 6 a.m. every day. I noticed a clean-cut Hispanic-looking man had tried talking to me every morning, and he must have been in his mid-30s, but I never thought it to be rude or that this was creepy, except that he kind of had a cleft lip that every time he smiled, a gold tooth always stood out. About a week of this, he had decided to get right up next to me as I was walking. After a few days of that, he had started putting his arm around my shoulder as we walked. Then finally, the worst part is pretty much every day, he'd hold himself against me so tight that he was purposely making his boner push up against me through his pants. Stupid me never put it together, and this went on for almost a year. I never told anyone because I was afraid I'd have to quit my job, and having a few bucks in my pocket was a great feeling. Thank God he never tried anything further, but every morning I really dreaded waking up. After a year, he had disappeared, and I was honestly so happy, and I thought that this was finally over. So jump ahead, I had just turned 16, and I got my first real job at a local Carvel. Now, I never had and never will have any issues with someone's sexuality. So when a coworker jokingly said, "Hey, one of our regulars think you're cute," I didn't really think anything of it. And assuming it was a girl, I was really excited, until the person showed up, and it was an older kind of homely looking man. I didn't really find it funny, but whatever, it is what it is. After about 11 p.m. closing, I leave to go home, and there he is. He tries talking to me, and I'm just walking home, but what do I notice? A slight cleft lip with a gold tooth sticking out. I literally froze still for a moment, totally in shock. Now, when I was 10, I was a short, skinny boy. At 16, however, I was 5'10" now, played high school baseball, and I was pretty muscular, strong, and a lot more confident now. So when this guy walked over to me and attempted to put his arm around me, it was horrible deja vu. Right at that moment, I pushed him away, and he got an angry look as he then started approaching me with aggression. Knowing in my heart that I'd never allow anyone to do something like that to me again, for the first time in my life, I punched someone in the face. I even shocked myself as he fell flat to the ground. Being scared to death, I ran home, and I never showed up at that Carvel again. Now, being a father, I'd never condone violence, but I also teach my sons that you have to be able to protect yourself, and protect what you feel is right, and also help those who truly need help as long as it's doable. I really think this was a big part in molding my future, because later on I became a medic with the FDNY, always trying to help people. Unfortunately, 9/11 gave me a lung disease, and even though I'm living on possibly borrowed time, I'll live forever and teach my sons to always try and be the best versions of yourself. I really appreciate this outlet of letting me finally get this off my chest after 35 years. So thank you, Southern Cannibal, and please be safe out there, everyone. For reference, I'm a 5'4", 18-year-old girl. I've been living in the same area my entire life, and nothing too crazy's happened to me while living there. One afternoon, I decided to go get a Monster energy drink from my local 7-Eleven that's about a block away from my house. On my way to the store, I passed the usual business strip consisting of like 5 stores. When I passed, I had noticed a man by his car in my peripheral vision that was by the sidewalk. It was on the main road, by the way. It was a sunny day, which had put me in a good mood, and once I got my energy drink, I was in an even better mood. I was walking past that same car again, and thought nothing of it. The guy wasn't there, so I felt better. When I was about halfway down the street to my townhouse, I had heard the sounds of shoes hitting the pavement in a hurried fashion, so I turned to see a tall man gaining on me. At first, I thought maybe I dropped something on the way and he was just going to return it to me, or perhaps he had to be somewhere and run past me. So as any considerate person, I moved to the side of the sidewalk to give him some room to run past, but he ran about 2 to 3 feet in front of me, a little to the side, and then slowed down, then making eye contact with me, and then smiling very creepily. He then said to me, "Habibi," which meant my love or my dear in Arabic. I already knew the general term from past experiences, and that made my heart drop. He kept pace with me, but stayed a little ahead of me. The man was about 6'1", and he held his car keys on a blue lanyard, which was really strange. My heart began to beat out of my chest, and he began to ask general questions like, "How are you? Are you getting groceries? What are you up to?" Since I had came from the store. But one question had really made me cautious and very weirded out. "Are you coming from school?" he asked me with a strange smile. It was literally late July, and school was out for a good month for almost everyone. And I also graduated that year. So I just answered back with, no, with a sly glare at him, assuming he should know that summer was here for most school kids. Whenever I answered him reluctantly, he would always immediately go, "Huh? Spit it out," slightly being pushy. It freaked me out and it mildly annoyed me as well. I just wanted to get home, which was approaching at the very end of the block, so I was really worried on what I should do. Keep walking past my home to avoid him, knowing where I live, and then risk getting possibly kidnapped or hurt or even harassed, or just hurry inside and just hope he doesn't follow me. I had so many thoughts running through my head, and my anxiety was going through the roof. "How's your summer going?" he asked, and I tried to answer him, but he once again replied with a "huh" in return. Strange as fuck. As we reached the front of my house, I slowed down a bit so he could continue walking ahead to give me time to get to my door just in case. I turned into my walkway and hurried up to my front door, keys already in hand, but my energy drink was open, so it hindered me from making any fast movements. When he realized I wasn't walking down the sidewalk with him, he turned and spun around to look at me from the main street, then yell, "Hello?" trying to get my attention. He literally followed me down almost an entire block just past the business strip of 4 stores, which was a huge red flag. When I turned to give him a glare, he then asked me if it was my house. I didn't answer him, and I finally opened my front door since I usually needed 2 hands to open it by pulling the door in slightly, and then also unlocking it because it's just really fidgety like that, making me take my time and struggle with one free hand. Luckily, it was easier that time to open it, so I got in quickly and then slammed the door to really show I was pissed at him. I then quickly locked it, and I was very relieved when he gave up and then walked back the way he came from. I leaned against my front door, letting out a heavy sigh. I was shaking uncontrollably. I then went to the living room to close the curtains as much as I could, while also being able to see to make sure he was gone, which he was. I wanted to call my boyfriend, but out of instinct, I had called my dad, and he answered. I explained the whole ordeal to my dad, and he praised me for barely talking to the man while hurrying back home. After he calmed me down, I went up to my room and was paranoid for the rest of the day until my dad finally got back home. My heart rate accelerated every time I heard a noise outside because I really thought that man would come back since he now knew where I lived. Thankfully though, he didn't, and he hasn't been back since. I also want to mention that on that day I was wearing shorts and an oversized black long sleeve sweater for my boyfriend and flip-flops. I was really afraid people would be drawn to my thighs, and I guess maybe that was partially why that man was following me. I talked to my father-in-law about it, and he said that that man might have been scoping me out to kidnap me. And I honestly think he might be right. For fellow women out there, please stay vigilant everywhere you are, even if it's a place you've lived by for a very long time. It just goes to show anything can happen at any time and anywhere. This took place in October of 2019 at a big weekend gathering for me because this lady from Lebanon became my permanent 24/7 nurse and caregiver, and they considered me family. So they wanted to throw a welcome to the family gathering. She became my nurse since my chronic illness, and my terminal illness was starting to progress since I became an adult. The thing to know about a Lebanese-style gathering is that there's always lots of people, and it's always a party. The gathering was hosted at her sister's house since she has a really big house. So it was my nurse and my service therapy dog Mandy, and we all went to the big gathering. I want to give you an idea about how Mandy is and what she looks like. She's a very big German Shepherd, and she has to be big because I'm a fall risk. She's very intimidating and protective, but for the most part, she's very, very sweet. She's really good with people, that is if they don't seem threatening, and she's also really good with kids. We always call her Mama Mandy because of how gentle and protective she is with me, and how she helps out so much. When we pulled up to my nurse's sister's house, we saw a lot of cars in the driveway, and my caregiver told me that they're all here to welcome me into the family. When I walked into the house, I noticed that it was filled with a lot of people. Mandy was a little protective at first, but when she got the idea I was safe, she mellowed out a little bit. The party was great, lots of fun, and a lot of gifts. There was one person at the party that seemed a little out of place. I tried to go talk to them and introduce myself, but whenever I would try to get close, Mandy would stop moving, and so it's kind of difficult when your walking support doesn't want to work with you, so I just kind of gave up. During the party, I had a small glass of wine, and that was it, because alcohol will hit me rather quick. I think that Mandy could tell I was a little bit of wine drunk because she would nudge my leg with her nose every time I would try to get up and walk. Anyways, we were all getting pretty tired, so my nurse and her sister helped me get to where I need to be sleeping for the night. My nurse was starting my IV fluids and feedings and helping me get my oxygen machine on and started. And of course, Mandy, being the big love bug she is, had to lay right on top of my legs. My nurse hooked me up to a wireless oxygen monitor, so that way she can take the monitor in the other room and make sure I'm still breathing good. And that way she knows if my oxygen accidentally got disconnected or something. I woke up in the middle of the night due to it being really hard for me to breathe. Then I thought that's weird because I shouldn't be having this much difficulty breathing, since I have an oxygen machine now. Then I felt Mandy nudging me with her nose, and I turned over, and I saw the same guy standing right next to my oxygen machine. The guy from earlier that I wasn't able to talk to. I had no idea that I was trying to talk to a complete nutcase, because he disconnected and was holding the oxygen tube from the machine, which set Mandy off. Before the guy could drop my oxygen tube and run off as the machine was beeping loudly, Mandy jumped off the bed and got a hold of the guy. She got a hold of the guy pretty damn good, and she bit down pretty hard because he was screaming in extreme pain while also bleeding pretty badly. Since the monitor started beeping really loudly in the other room, my nurse and her sister came in immediately, wondering what was going on, and they saw the guy on the floor with Mandy not letting go. They saw that he was holding on to my oxygen tube, and my nurse took it away from him, then reconnected it back to the machine. She made sure that I was breathing good, while her sister then called the police. My nurse made sure my IV machine and feeding machine didn't get messed with as well. I finally told Mandy to come because one of their cousins came in and stood right by the guy, just to make sure he didn't try to take off. Once the police finally came, they took my statement and took the guy away. After that happened, I was so scared that night, but my nurse stayed right by my side just to keep me calm, also making sure that my oxygen machine was working well and that I was breathing good during the whole night. Mandy could sense that I was scared and in distress, so instead of laying on my feet, she went into dog therapy mode, laying right next to me, kind of like a big stuffed animal, and she laid her head on my arm, letting me know that Mama Mandy was there and that everything's okay now. From now on, whenever we go to these family gatherings, whoever's hosting them always makes sure that they only allow people they actually know to come in. Ever since that night, my nurse and I have always let Mandy lay right next to my oxygen machine. That night shook me up pretty good, and now when she's laying by my oxygen machine, Mandy's constantly staring at the door whenever we go to the family gatherings. She doesn't act protective around my machine when it's someone that she knows, like my nurse. I'm extremely glad Mandy was there. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't even be here telling you this experience. So yeah, thank God for my nurse, and thank God for Mandy. I'm a female from New Zealand, and I'm about 5'1" in height, and I weigh about 50 kilograms, which is around 110 pounds for American people. When I was 19 years old, I had worked at a supermarket to get money while studying in college. I was on my lunchtime break, and we have a sitting area out the front of the supermarket that overlooks the car park. I was sitting there eating my lunch along with about 3 other employees, and just looking around at my surroundings. A car had pulled up and parked in front of us on the opposite side of the car park. A man and a woman stepped out of the car. The man looked angry, and as I was looking around, I noticed them, and I looked their way. I was in no way staring for a long amount of time, but as I looked, the man and I made direct eye contact. His eyes just turned to absolute hate, and he then began yelling at me from across the car park. "Hey, what the fuck are you staring at, bitch?" and other very disgusting words. I froze, and I felt my body go stiff and hot. My work colleagues around me were also confused and just telling me to ignore him. He continued yelling, and he now started making his way right over towards me. One of my coworkers then told me to go inside and find the manager. I then walked quickly inside, with the man still walking over towards where I was sitting. Those still outside began to tell him to leave, and he continued swearing and yelling, but didn't stop to speak with them, and instead followed me inside. I went straight up to the service desk, and once inside, found a manager. By this time, I now had tears running down my face, and I was uncontrollably shaking from how scared I was. I could hear the man yelling from outside as he entered the store, and was now telling me that he was going to kill me, and that I shouldn't be so nosy and stare at people. All I had done was simply looked at him at the wrong time, and now the man was threatening me. Was this guy nuts or what? Some of the men from my work were trying to calm the man down and escort him out, but he just continued being aggressive and using very disgusting language. The police then showed up, as someone must have phoned for them. Still yelling and not listening, the man was then escorted out by the police, but not without a fight. He was almost dragged, and when he finally got outside, he tried to run away, but he was then tased for resisting arrest. Once the man was taken, I was still very uneasy for a few hours. I was sent home as I didn't think I'd be able to continue my shift. I later found out that apparently this man was very high on crystal meth. The person who called the police was also a lady in the building next door who witnessed the whole thing. I continued working there for another 2 years, and I witnessed a few more scary encounters, but this was by far the most scary. For some background, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. This place is not for the weak. There are a few areas of town that are extremely dangerous. There are areas of town that I won't unlock my doors, let alone be caught dead walking. Everyone sees it as the glitz and glamour, lights of the strip, but it's so much more than that. We are number 1 in human trafficking and dead last in education. Not something I would consider by any stretch, but anyway, on to the story. So my name is Elizabeth, and when I was in middle school around 12 or 13 years old, I had a friend named Brittany. She was outgoing and basically the cool girl. Her parents let her do whatever she wanted, and I had spent a lot of days at her house. Well, I grew up kind of sheltered. I was not allowed to go out past the street lights, and I also wasn't allowed to do anything adventurous. I also had no idea what hiding alcohol or what rape looked like at all, just very sheltered from the world. I would soon find out in a very bad way. So one night Brittany had convinced my parents to allow me to spend the night. I'm not really sure how. She lived in a bad area of Las Vegas and her house is really dirty. She lived in a 2-story house, but can you really even call it a house because it was so small? And looking back, it had a very weird layout. Her living room consisted of a couch and a dartboard. I don't even know where her kitchen was because I never saw it. Upstairs was her room and her parents' room. She had shared her room with her brother, but he was never there. Her room was very dirty and littered with clothes and trash. Not to mention, it didn't smell very great. But I liked to spend time with Brittany because she accepted me. Anyway, that night at her house, after playing darts and dropping one of the darts into my hand and bleeding for what felt like forever, we're upstairs dressing up in all of her raunchy clothing. She had put on one of her double D bras on my barely A-cup chest and then filled it with socks, telling me that I looked beautiful because I had a huge chest and I was a small build at the time. I was incredibly short, so I probably looked ridiculous. I had a very low self-esteem, so whatever she said looked good, I believed it. Anyway, she asked me if we could go to Crystal Palace tomorrow, and she told me to call my parents and ask. For some context, Crystal Palace is a skating rink in town located in a really bad area of the town, and I didn't even know how to skate, so I called and my dad picked up. Now, my dad is a really badass guy, but he's horrifying, and I have plenty of scary stories about him. But anyway, I asked if I could go tomorrow around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, to which he then replied back with, "Well, no, because I'm picking you up at noon. We have things to do tomorrow, so I'll see you at noon." I get off the phone kind of disgruntled, and then tell her, "Well, my dad said no because he's picking me up at noon." To which she then said, "Well, he didn't say no, he just said you couldn't go tomorrow." Now, I was a good kid, and I always listened to my parents. I know that's very unbelievable, but it's true. I ended up agreeing with her because I really wanted to go, seeing as I had never been before. Well, we get our shoes on, and I'm still wearing this ridiculous get-up, and I grabbed some money from my suitcase that I'd brought with me, and her uncle picked us up. At least, she said it was her uncle. I also want to mention that Brittany is white. She doesn't speak any other languages. This guy is Mexican and mostly speaks Spanish. He's extremely creepy too, and he seems way too young to be her uncle. But I digress. Families are always different, so why couldn't hers be, right? So we get to Crystal Palace and we go inside and we tell the guy our shoe size. And of course, she has no money, so I have to pay for the both of us. At this point, I have a little bit of money left, but not very much. As a kid, I always carried around all of my money for some stupid reason. And well, having very little money scared me. So we went onto the skating rink floor, and I couldn't skate. But she said it wasn't a big deal because nobody's gonna care. I'm trying my absolute best, but I just keep falling down. Meanwhile, she's going lightning fast in circles. The DJ is a real jackass, and he watches me eat shit before then telling me to get off the floor. That if I can't skate, I can't be on the rink. I'll never get that $35 back. So I go sit on the outside and I grab myself a big bag of chips from the concession stand. At this point, I only have change left. I'm watching her skate around having fun, and all I want to do is go home now. I went to the bathroom to chill myself out and basically do something besides just sit there. I was bored as fuck. I ran into one of my good friend's sister with her friends, and I said hi to her and we had chatted for a little. Looking back, I really should have asked her for a ride home since she only lives 6 houses away from me. I know, I'm so stupid. So I go back to sitting down watching Brittany, and she then comes up to me with 2 twin girls. One of them had a labret lip piercing. They're both way too cool for the likes of me. Brittany literally had the nerve to tell me, I'm bored, so I'm gonna spend the night at their house. In my head, I'm just thinking, oh hell no you're not. What was this girl even thinking? I mean, I wasn't even supposed to be here and now she's just gonna ditch me? We're 12 years old. Her parents really didn't care what she did though. Anyway, I told her that she needed to call her dad and get me a ride back home because at this point I'm having an anxiety attack and I just keep repeating, I have to go home. My dad'll be there at noon and he'll kill me. I honestly thought that he would beat me to death. My father is not a nice man. Anyway, she agrees to call her dad. We grab our stuff and give back our skates and then head outside to the payphone because this is the day before cell phones and before Uber. Before any of the saving graces we have today. I gave her my last 35 cents and she dials her dad on the payphone. Then she says, Hey Dad, I met these girls and I'm gonna go hang out at their house tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye. At this point I'm furious because now I'm out of money so I can't even make a call and she didn't even ask him to come pick me up. I then look at her and say, What the fuck, dude? I'm supposed to go home. You can't ditch me like this. To which she then replied back with, You can come with us, but my dad's not coming. I was now fucking terrified because I'd never been outside at night, let alone go wandering into the darkness with some random strangers. But I thought I had no choice at this point. Looking back, my dumbass could have just walked into the gas station and asked someone to call my dad for me or my mom. But my naive self just followed her. We're now walking down the streets. The Vegas streets are not like any other place. Sometimes next to a sidewalk you'll have a wall. Other times there are big patches of dirt for no reason, and they're always shaped really weird. Some are curved, some are triangular. Some are actual lots where houses used to be. You get the point. So as we're walking, I see a homeless camp with a tent and a bunch of random garbage in one of these dirt areas. One of the twin girls walks into it, and she starts talking with a man who's extremely dirty. And then she sticks her hand in his pants for what felt like forever, and then comes back with a cigarette. She exchanges a cigarette with her sister back and forth, also asking us if we wanted a drag. I refuse, but my friend takes one drag. Gross, I thought to myself. But I didn't realize at the time that the one girl had just given a hand job for a cigarette. Then all of a sudden, I hear screaming. We then look over at another dirt lot, and we say there's a large African-American man on top of some woman, and she's now screaming and begging for help. His eyes met ours, and he immediately screams at us.
Hey, what are you doing? What are you looking at? You like what you see? Come over here.
And right at this point, he gets up and starts chasing us. We're all running down the street at this point, and I literally feel like I'm gonna die. I have no breath when we finally lose this guy. I can't even remember him, but I was really grateful that I didn't get grabbed. Very naive, but I didn't even know what was going on. I would come to find out that he was raping that woman. I really hope she eventually got away. We continue our walk and we end up at a 7-Eleven. The girl with the lip piercing tells us all to wait there, and she walks across the street to meet with some high school looking guy who makes out with her. After quite some time, she comes across the street, goes into the 7-Eleven, and then comes out with a brown paper bag. I didn't know it at the time, but it was alcohol. So at this point I'm hot from the Vegas summer and I'm thirsty as hell. I asked if I could have a drink since they were all drinking it, and I was extremely thirsty. Before drinking it though, I had asked, "Well, what is it?" To which they replied, "It's like Sprite." So I took 2 big gulps before they ripped it out of my hands and then said, "Hey, that's enough! This is ours!" I was really upset because it tasted like the apple water I would get at school, which was my favorite, and I was so thirsty, but I figured whatever. At least now I don't have such a dry mouth. So these girls had us get on a bus with them, and I then explained that I don't have any money, but for some reason they got on the bus for free. I still don't know how because from then on I never could, but whatever. When we got off, I still don't recognize the area we're at, and it's late. I'm exhausted. I started complaining. "How much further are we going? I'm exhausted. Is there any chance I can get a ride home when we get to your house? Can your mom take me? I just want to go home." At this point, I just want to cry. They told me they would ask their brother, then said, "I'm sure our brother will take you, but you're gonna need to lose that bra or he's gonna rape you." I'm now just thinking, what the fuck? Now remember, I was wearing Brittany's bra and it was a D cup full of socks, so I assumed that's why they said that. We ditched the bra and socks in some random neighborhood and continue walking. I'm now hopeful that I'll get home okay when we come to a cul-de-sac. There's a wall that has some bricks, almost like stairs leading up to the back wall. They said we're gonna have to jump this wall. Now, I've never jumped a wall before, but this one is like 3 or 4 feet tall, so I'm thinking no big deal, right? Wrong. Each girl makes an audible gasp or comment before jumping, and when it's finally my turn, I look over the top, and it's a 10-foot drop on the other side. I'm now freaking out majorly, and I ask through shaking breaths if they can just tell me how to walk around, and then one of the girls shouts, "The people in these houses have guns, and if they see you, they'll shoot you. Now hurry up and jump." My friend then tells me, "Don't worry, I'll catch you." Keep in mind, I'm petrified of heights, and I don't really trust this bitch at this point, but I don't feel like I have any other option. So I lower myself over the side, shaking like crazy, and I barely feel something with my foot when my arms then give out and I drop into the ground. I guess I must have been on an adrenaline high, or the alcohol I consumed was enough to make me okay, because I didn't feel that hurt when I fell. I got up and was again having a hard time breathing and regaining my balance. Well, after about 2 minutes, we're now back to following these insane twins again, and we come to an apartment complex. They let us in the gate and we continue to follow. I feel like I'm almost free when one of the girls slashes a tire and then says, "I hate that guy. Holy crap. Where did she get a knife? I just want to go home." We finally make it into their apartment, which is very small. Living room on the left, kitchen to the right, bedrooms down the hall in the center of that. I start asking, "Can your mom take me home? Can someone please take me home?" One of these girls then says to relax and then walks down the hallway and into a room on the left. I heard her talking, and after some time, I see her brother come out and say hi, and I then ignored him because of her previous comment. Well, she comes back and she tells me that her mom can't take me, so I'm gonna have to stay the night and then find my own way back home. I really wish I could say I left, but I didn't. I just laid in their bedroom floor while they climbed into their bunk beds and then went to bed. I cried myself to sleep. I didn't even sleep for long. I woke up around 5 a.m. and had basically punched Brittany awake, telling her we're leaving. that I'm done. We ended up eating a giant bowl of Starburst before we take off, and we're out of there. I keep telling her how mad I am and how my dad's gonna kill me if we aren't back by noon, and that I don't even know where we are, all through sobbing. She promises we'll get back in time and tells me I'm being ridiculous. We end up taking the bus after crying to the bus driver about how we're lost and just trying to get home. When we finally make it back, it's 11:30 a.m., and I think to myself, I'm safe. My dad will never know. I felt a rush of relief. We get into our room and I change and pack my crap and then change back into my clothes. I never want to see Brittany again after this. Well, I wasn't safe quite yet. Remember how I said my parents are very strict? Well, apparently they called that night to say goodnight and I love you, and her parents actually had the audacity to say, "Oh, we don't know where she is. They're out on Charleston and Nellis somewhere." For those of you that don't live in Vegas, that is a high crime area. My parents didn't sleep at all that night. So when my dad showed up at noon, he was so angry he was shaking and his face was all red. My dad may not look very intimidating, but looks can be deceiving. He's 5'4" and he has a very skinny build with short brown hair. But oh my God, he's like a monster when he's angry. He ripped me out of that house and said I would never return to her parents before then closing the door. Honestly, I didn't even want to go back. I didn't say a word because of how fearful I was of my father. We sat in silence in the car for about 10 minutes as he drove us home. And then right before we got home, he started screaming at me about how much trouble I was in. When we got home, he beat the shit out of me with a belt on my bed. Then an hour later, covered in bruises with tears streaming down my face, my sweet mother came in holding me, asking what happened. I barely told her anything that happened, and she said she was so sorry and so worried about me. My dad, on the other hand, didn't even seem to have much remorse, because I should have known better than to follow shitty people around and not call him or find an adult. But again, I was so sheltered I never even thought I would be in that kind of situation. Please stay safe out there and find an adult immediately in a gas station if you need help. Don't do what I did. Now I know Vegas streets so well I can tell you exactly how to get home from anywhere here. I now use Uber, and I'm very thankful that I've never seen those twins. Hopefully I never see them again. I went to meet a guy from Craigslist at a fast food restaurant. Public places are safe, right? Well, while I was waiting all dolled up, a guy sitting nearby had chatted me up. I let him know what I was there for, and he had asked for my number in case I wanted to hang out in the future. He seemed nice, and obviously I was single. So in the spirit of wanting to keep my options open, I gave him my number. He immediately texted me with his number so I could save it in my phone, and then he went back to his seat. The guy I was supposed to meet then walked in. Well, he looked 20 years older than in the pic he had sent me. This was before apps where you could send a live pic and such, and he obviously had sent me a very old photo. He then sat down and proceeded with his niceties. I shot a nervous look over to the guy that I just met, as I was very uncomfortable, and also not sure how to get out of the situation without being rude. The old guy then asked me if I wanted anything to eat. I declined and I said he should order if he wanted to, hoping to get him away from me so I could escape. He didn't budge, and I smiled nervously, trying to think of anything to get out of this. My phone then buzzed, and the dude I first met told me to go into the bathroom and he would help me. I was so grateful. I quickly excused myself to the bathroom and hid out there for a good 10 minutes. I come out not sure what I would see, and I see the dude is talking to the old guy, saying that he was actually a friend of mine and I had promised to drive him somewhere. The old guy wasn't buying it, but I quickly jumped in and confirmed the lie. I said that the dude's sister had texted me when I was in the bathroom and that she was in labor headed to the hospital and that we had to go right away. The old guy was totally confused, but the dude became frantic to create a sense of urgency, to which I then apologized to the old guy for not being able to complete our date. Luckily he left and I sat with the other dude, thanking him profusely for rescuing me. We sat and talked a little, but he was telling me how he was in massage therapy school and he could use someone to practice on, etc. He didn't say it in a creepy way or anything, seeming totally nice. Well, apparently the old guy was still in the parking lot, and seeing we hadn't left for our emergency, he started blowing up my phone. I blocked him, and after another 10 minutes, he seemingly got the hint and then drove off. Once the old guy was safely away from the area, I decided to go home and just be glad that I got out of that awkward situation. The dude then asked if I could give him a ride, as he would otherwise have to take the bus. He was nice, but it was late and I was tired, so I declined. He tried a couple of more times saying he could give me gas money, buy me food, etc., and he brought up the massage thing again. I firmly declined and told him again thank you, and then drove off. I didn't even get more than a mile away when I got a text from the guy. "Stupid bitch, I do something nice for you and you can't even let me come back to your place and get my reward? You women are all the same." For several days afterward, the old guy kept calling me, leaving me voicemails where he was clearly enjoying himself. Unfortunately, even if you block a number, they can still leave you voicemails. So I dodged 2 bullets that night and escaped the clutches of both the super old guy and the fake nice guy. I don't think either one of them had any good intentions for me that night. My name is Kat. I'm a female and I was 15 years old at the time. This happened to me along with my girlfriend, who we'll call Destiny. We lived in a rural area of northern Idaho where there really wasn't much to do. So skipping school to go to a neighborhood park was almost an exciting adventure. On this particular day, we were both tired of dealing with typical teenage drama in school, and we were itching for a change of scenery. As we wandered around the park, I had noticed a white pickup truck parked nearby on the side of the road. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, but a strange feeling nagged at me, telling me that we needed to leave. I tried to brush it off, but as we walked towards a nearby hayfield, my dread increased, and I saw that the truck had followed us. My heart raced as the truck began to drive right towards us. We ran back to the park, but the truck turned around and went back to the park as well. We then ran back to the field, only to have the same thing happen again. I knew this field and neighborhood very well, like on the back of my hand, so we tried to sneak through the yards to get to my house. As we ran towards my house, the sound of the truck grew closer and closer. My heart pounded in my chest as we finally made it to the doorstep. I peeked out of the window and I saw the truck drive by once more. We never told any of our parents what happened, knowing we would be in trouble for skipping school. But the memory of that white pickup truck and what they may have had planned for us stayed in my mind for years. It was a chilling reminder to always be aware of your surroundings, especially if you're in an unfamiliar place. I knew that trusting our gut instincts was vital, as our intuition is often the key to our survival. Every time I saw a white pickup truck on the road or pass by that park, a deep sense of uneasiness washed over me. That experience had taught me that no matter how innocuous something might seem, danger can always be lurking nearby. Please always trust your instincts. It's your survival skill. Use it. I'm a 19-year-old female. During my second year of college, I had a distressing encounter on my way home. The routine was simple: a 20-minute bus ride, a walk through a narrow path to reach a set of railway tracks, and then waiting on the opposite side for my brother to pick me up. My mother had always warned me to be careful about this spot, a known hangout for substance abusers, though I'd never encountered anyone out of the ordinary. One day, as I walked in my usual waiting spot, I noticed a guy probably in his mid to late 20s glancing at me and something further away while walking off. I found it to be strange, but I dismissed it. Arriving in my waiting spot, I realized I was alone. It didn't raise alarms because it was during the period when things were gradually returning to normal after the COVID-19 pandemic. Minutes passed, and I heard an unsettling sound. A cough, despite no one else being around. I turned to find a man probably in his late 30s or early 40s behind a secluded pillar, dressed too well to be a typical troublemaker. To my horror, he was now engaged in pleasuring himself, clearly wanting me to witness it. Shocked and frozen, I didn't know what to do. My boyfriend at the time and I were in a long-distance relationship, and none of my friends lived close by either. Desperate for help, I texted my ex-boyfriend who worked in the building right in front of me. We were on good terms, or so I thought. His response shocked me. "Why are you asking me for help? I'm not your boyfriend anymore. Go ask your current boyfriend." Feeling truly helpless by my ex's unexpected response, I could still see the man in my peripheral vision continuing in his inappropriate behavior, all while maintaining an uncomfortable gaze upon me. Summoning my courage, I decided to move forward, walking towards a spot where other people were present, seeking safety. In retrospect, I wish I had taken a video of him in the act to serve as evidence and reported the incident to the police. However, my initial shock prevented rational thinking. Despite continuing the same route, I never encountered that man again. It dawned on me that the first guy had probably seen the indecent act but chose to silently walk away, leaving me to deal with the unsettling situation alone. My heart goes out to the family of that creepy man. What if they don't know anything about his malicious acts and consider him the best son, husband, or father, all while he lurks behind the shadows? For a bit of context, I need to explain how transportation works in the area where I live. So where I live, the public transportation is absolute shit. There's only one not very reliable public bus that takes you in and out of the residential area and is a long way walking. So the people in this residential area came up with a cab sort of system where you pay by the seat. So one of these cabs fits up to 4 people. And a little under a year ago, they decided to identify these cabs with a sticker with a number that states the car as part of the cab line. Also, the drivers have to have an ID that has the cab line info. Now on to the story. A couple of times men have tried to give me a ride. I do my best to ignore them, but sometimes it's a little scary. The part of the residential area where I live is a little bit isolated. So not a lot of cars or people go through there, and I have to walk alone from my house to the cab line/bus stop. At one opportunity a couple of months ago, I was walking from my house to the stop, and I was wearing headphones, so I wasn't paying that much attention. That was the first mistake on my part, and a car pulled over next to me. This wasn't all that strange because I had been using this cab line for a while, and a lot of the drivers know me. And if they see me, they pull over so I don't have to walk all the way to the stop. The driver then said,
"Hey, are you going to a place of destination?"
I said yes, and I got inside the car without even checking the windshield for the ID number. Second mistake on my part. Here's where alarms started going off in my head. First, the cars in the line tend to be older cars with no AC. And this was a newer car. And when I got in, he locked the doors and turned on the AC. It was at this point I realized that this wasn't one of the cabs, but a complete stranger. He began to ask me things like my name, exactly where I lived, and other personal things. I responded very vaguely with my heart beating really fast. I was starting to panic, so I texted a friend my location, and I told him to call me ASAP. At this point, we were close to the destination, and the guy wasn't slowing down the car and was about to pass the stop. Then the call came through, and I started to talk to my friend like he was my boyfriend.
"Hey baby, I'm almost there. Just wait for me and then we'll go, okay?"
My friend was really confused, but when the man heard my conversation, he suddenly stopped the car, then saying,
"Sorry, I was so entertained talking to you that I almost passed the stop. Maybe we could see each other again sometime."
Then he unlocked the car, and I bolted out, barely even saying anything. After that day, I became much more aware of my surroundings, and I tend to only get inside the cabs in the stop unless I clearly see the ID of the car. A couple of my friends said that I was overreacting, but still, it scared the shit out of me. Then today comes. I was walking from my house to the stop, no headphones in this time, and when I'm halfway there, a car starts driving very slowly next to me. I keep on walking, and this older man that was driving starts talking to me.
Hey, are you Alicia's daughter? Do you live around here?
I responded with, no, I'm not, and I keep on walking. He just insisted, saying he was a neighbor and that he could give me a ride. I replied again that I wasn't and that I didn't want the ride. Mind you, my mom wasn't called that and has been dead for over a decade. And my grandma that people sometimes confuse to be my mom is also not called that either. He kept insisting, and I began walking faster, approaching the stop where there were more people. It was at this point that this man became angry and started to yell, saying this was the last time he would be nice to me and offer me a ride. He then sped up and finally left. That's when I got to the stop to get inside the cab that left me at my destination. When I got to work, I had told my boss all about that encounter, and she said to me, "Thank God you kept on walking, or you probably could have been kidnapped." So yeah, that was my morning. I really need a car. When I was 9, I went to the beach with my grandma and my 2 dogs, a lab mix and a boxer mix. The hotel room I was staying in was on the ground floor, meaning that I had a glass door from the living room that faced the lawn and patio area. One afternoon, my grandma and I went down to the beach. For reference, you had to walk down an extremely long pier to get to the stairs that led to the beach. And next to those stairs was a deck where you could sit and watch the beach. As I was walking down, holding my boxer mix on a lead while my grandma had the lab mix, a chihuahua hopped out on the deck area, startling my boxer. The couple sitting there was an old one, and I remember the old man was wearing a red Hawaiian shirt. My grandma did small talking with them, and I really just wanted to go to the beach, and my dog seemed on edge, but I just assumed it was because of the chihuahua. After playing on the beach for a while, I made friends with a girl my age who was also staying at my hotel and went to the same preschool as me. After my dogs had finally started to get tired of playing, I had made plans to hang out with that girl that very same night, and we left for our room. When the sun had set and I had picked up the game Twister from the lobby, my grandma went to sit out on the deck overlooking the beach with my lab while the boxer stayed with me. I walked up to the 3rd floor and I got my friend from her room before we went back to my room. It was dark now, but the hallways were well lit. When we got into my room, my friend and I started playing Twister. But a couple of minutes after we started the game, my boxer had started barking at the glass door, which spooked us. Since the lights were off on the patio, we couldn't see anything, but I did check anyways. I didn't see anything when I looked out the window, so I assumed there was just a dog outside. To calm my dog down, I had asked my friend to go grab a treat for her. As we grabbed a treat, my dog had peed all over the mat on the game. Looking back, the barking and the peeing on the game was a huge red flag, as my dog never did those things, and she had already been out to use the bathroom right before this. Since our game night was now ruined, my friend went back to the room after helping me clean up the mess as best as I could. I didn't have a phone back then, so I decided to walk out to the pier so I could tell my grandma about the mess. As I walked past the patio area to get to the pier's entrance, I saw the same old lady from before with her chihuahua. She was sitting with 5 other people, and there were a ton of beer cans, but the old man from earlier wasn't there. I didn't really care because it didn't matter. I started walking down the pier, and it was now pitch black, and there was no lighting, so I had all of my focus on where I was going. I was really afraid of the dark back then, and I still kind of am now, and I just had this sense of dread. I felt like I was being followed, but I just chalked it up to being afraid of the dark. I did start to walk faster though, and I refused to look back because I wanted to prove to myself that I could brave the darkness. As I reached the end of the pier where the deck was, my lab popped out and started barking aggressively. I thought that I had spooked her, so I knelt down and pet her. But when I sat down next to my grandma, she had then told me something that made my stomach drop. There was a man behind me when my lab had started barking. The same man wearing a red Hawaiian shirt. Needless to say, I was freaked out. But my grandma just said that he probably just had too much to drink and mistook me for someone else, and that my dog made him come back to his senses. I didn't fully believe this, but it at least gave me an explanation to help calm myself down. I never saw that couple or their friends again, and I definitely closed the curtains to the patio at night. I still wonder what would have happened if my dog didn't pop out and scare that guy, or if my grandma wasn't on the deck but down on the beach. But the thought that scares me the most is what if I had turned around or slowed down on the pier? Who knows what could have happened to me? This may be a long one with a brief description of a few encounters. Here goes. Here's a bit of background about myself in order for you to understand why I did a few. For the record, I'm 27 years old today, and I'm a female. My mom and dad got a divorce when I was 7 years old. Not the trigger here, as a divorce is so common these days. But in the same year, not even a month after, my mom got in a relationship with another guy. Let's call him Sergeant. Now, I know a lot will speculate that Sergeant and my mom had an affair, and that is the reason that she and my dad split up. But that wasn't the case, as my mom and dad weren't together for a long time before they got divorced. You see, my dad was abusive towards my mom and sister. My sister Tanya is 9 years older than me, making me the literal baby of the family. So I never got abused by my dad. But one day Tanya wrote my mom a letter that if my mom didn't leave my dad, she'd kill herself. I also want to mention that she was 15 at the time. My mom immediately moved out of my dad's place and into another home with me and my sister, in effect leaving him but not divorcing him. Back to 1 year later when Mom and Sergeant got together and she and my dad got a divorce. Sergeant was in the military. He lived in another city that was approximately 236 miles away from my family's hometown. He would come visit my mom every weekend, buy her flowers, and just be the perfect guy she never had. Well, when I was 9, my mom moved Tanya and I away from our town and into the house of Sergeant. This was the final school year for Tanya, and she would now have to move to another school. So yeah, it was tough, and she really kept busy most of the time trying to catch up with schoolwork and making friends. Because of the major age gap, Tanya and I never got along. I was the typical little sister trying to be friends with my sister, and she would always push me away, sometimes even making things up that I did just to get me in trouble so that I would just leave her alone. She would, for example, taunt me, and whenever I retaliated, she would run to Sergeant and tell him and my mom that I was being a brat and being super disrespectful. I would then get in trouble even though I didn't initiate the fight. This would happen often, until she left to go study. So yeah, back to the punishment when I got in trouble. You see, my mom had never dished out punishment. She left that up to Sergeant, and he would hit you on the bum until your bum was blue and red with swelling. I think one time his grip slipped, and he actually landed a blow on my back. You may wonder what the hell he used to hit me with. Well, it was the regular old belt, and sometimes one of those chain link belts. Sergeant wasn't fit to be a parent. He didn't have any kids of his own, and the only discipline he knew was what he was taught in the military. He was the typical guy. You have to put the toilet paper on the roll and fold the tip into the triangle. No light must be left on if the room isn't being used. And whenever something is asked of you, you're expected to immediately drop everything and obey. And by everything, I mean everything. Even if, say for example, you were doing some business in the toilet. He also didn't want anything to be out of place. Anyway, I would get punished immediately each time Tanya would tell on me without question. When I tried to explain my side, I would get hit even harder, and then more times when I was then being told I may not talk back. So yeah, eventually I completely drew back into my shell, and I didn't really speak to my sister at all anymore, even if she came to me and tried to coax out a reaction from me. After Tanya left for studies, I was around 10 at this time, and Sergeant couldn't use her tattles to punish me anymore, so he got creative. When I forgot the bathroom light on, he would drag me from my room by my hair to the bathroom, yell at me, and then start hitting me. When I would leave a toy out, he would hit me. When I would do basically anything that wasn't up to his standards, he would hit me. Now, I would complain to my mom, but she would always tell me that I asked for it, that I was out of line and he was disciplining me. So yeah, I eventually stopped talking to my mom as well. So right around the time when I was 12, I was still getting hit by Sergeant, and I got emotionally shut down. By this stage, Sergeant and my mom had gotten married. I no longer felt the pain, as I started smoking in secret, and I would start looking at Sergeant in the eyes when he hit me, refusing to show pain and not crying when he was hitting me. This would piss him off even more, and the beatings at this stage got even more intense, so much so that I started bleeding one time. But still, I would refuse to cry, refuse to say a word, and just look him in the eye while he was hitting me. At some stage, Sergeant and my mom found out that I was smoking, and then obviously I would get beaten even more. But I never stopped. I tried to hide it, and sometimes they would smell the smoke on me, and then the hitting started again. This cycle was until I was 14. Then Sergeant got tired of not getting anything out of the beatings, so he started verbally abusing me instead, saying things like, "You're really fucked up. No wonder your mom doesn't love you." I, as usual, didn't show emotion. Now keep in mind, I wasn't even a problem child. I didn't sneak out and drink. I never went to parties. I didn't do drugs. Hell, I didn't even have sex until I was 22. Cigarettes were the only bad thing that I did, and it was a coping mechanism. I was a quiet child, always in my room, never spoke to my mom, sister, or Sergeant, because it felt like the three of them had made some kind of pact to make my life hell. For example, while Sergeant and my mom were still only dating, which I think I was around 8 at the time, I cried about something, like full-on cry with snot running out of my nose and everything. My mom and Tanya laughed at me and said nasty things that I can't even recall. Then my mom grabbed a sock and stuffed it in my mouth. I can't recall if she put tape over it or if she held my hands back or why, but I couldn't get the sock out of my mouth. I just remember that I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't get the sock out. I remember getting more frantic, and the more frantic I got, the less I could breathe, and the more Tanya and my mom would laugh at me. So yeah, back to when I was 12, I really saw my family as the enemy, and I locked myself away in my room to try and stay safe. My dad and I still saw each other every school vacation, and since he was 380 kilometers away, I couldn't go on weekends. He was super nice to me, and at this stage, the only good thing in my eyes going for me. I told him all about Sergeant's beatings, and my dad actually did threaten Sergeant at some point to stop hitting me, but Sergeant didn't stop, and eventually, I stopped complaining to my dad. I mean, what is the use? My mom has custody, and she isn't stopping Sergeant. Sergeant's abuse, both verbal and sometimes physical, continued until I was 17. Then he got a job overseas, and he would come home for short periods of time, and during that time I would go stay at friends or family. But the thing is, even though Dad never hit me or verbally abused me, I still felt empty. He would always only want to know how Tanya's doing. Remember, he did abuse Tanya and Mom, so Tanya never visited or saw my dad for years. I think 5 years after the divorce. My dad realized that he really messed up with abusing them, and he did repent and never again abused anyone in his life after that. He also said he was sorry, and he did show remorse. But every time I would visit him, remember, this is my safe haven at this stage, but he wouldn't give me any attention. He would just talk about Tanya, go out to clubs, and socialize with his friends. He would take me with him to the bars as he didn't have any sitters, and he would then just push money in my hands and say go buy sweets or keep yourself busy. So yeah, that's my little family dynamic. So let's get into the shady stuff now. 1. Remember, I started smoking at age 12. Well, when I was at my dad's and he handed me money to go buy sweets, I went to go buy cigarettes instead. I think I was 13 then. Anyway, I went to a store about 1 kilometer away from the bar he was at. I ran into a shady character on my way there. He kept following me from the opposite side of the street. The walk to the shop was dark, as a few of the streetlights were off. I walked faster, but the stranger kept pace. Less than a block from the shop, the stranger crossed the road and came up to me. This guy came up to me and asked me for directions on a dark street. I told him that I didn't know the place that he was referring to, and he then kept insisting that I go with him and that I show him around. After what felt like forever, I pointed to the store, and I then said I was needed at that store, that I can't stand here much longer or otherwise people will wonder why I'm not at the store yet. He just said okay, no worries, and walked away. I then went to the store, bought my cigarettes, and started my journey back to the bar to where my dad was. This time, however, I kept an eye out, but I didn't see the man again. When I was right in front of the bar, the same man stepped out of nowhere, this time being more forceful that I go with him and show him where the place is. I think it was a motel that he was looking for. I told him that I don't know and that my dad is right inside. I then pointed to the bar and that he'll definitely know if he wants to ask him instead, but he didn't make one move to go towards the bar. Right when I started panicking, someone came out of the bar door, drawing this man's attention away from me. That's when I then booked it inside the bar to go to my dad. I didn't tell my dad about the encounter as I didn't want to get in trouble for going to buy cigarettes. Anyway, about half an hour later, this guy comes into a bar with a buddy of his, and they just have a drink, both eyeing me. I ended up staying attached to my dad's hip for the whole rest of the night, and those strangers never did approach me or my dad again. This happened back in 2020. I'm a female, and I was 19 years old at the time. My mom used to be a baker, and she needed some chocolates for decoration. Since my siblings were asleep, my mom had asked me to get some from the nearby shop. As it was close by, I thought I'd just walk. Most of the shops that I went to were closed due to an ongoing strike. Unfortunately, I was unaware of it, and the ones that were open didn't have the brand of chocolate that my mom wanted. Due to the strike, the place had really looked like a ghost town, with not a soul in sight. I was determined though to get that chocolate, so I walked a bit further but still had no luck. Then finally, I decided to head home. I could reach home either by a long route or a short one. Since the short route includes trespassing through the neighbor's property, I chose the long route, mainly because I didn't want to cause any inconvenience to them. As I was walking, a van with 2 men passed me and stopped right in the middle of the road, just a couple of meters ahead of me. I didn't think much of it because I assumed they might be lost and looking for directions. Suddenly, the man sitting in the passenger seat stuck his head out of the window, turned back, and then looked at me. His gaze moved in a way that he examined me from head to toe. He then gave me a creepy smile and sat back. Since it seemed harmless, I just brushed it off and continued walking. As I was about to reach the back of the van, the driver did the exact same thing as the guy in the passenger seat. He stuck his head out the window, turned back to look at me, and sat back, all while smiling very creepily. That's when my alarm bell started to ring, and I quickly moved away from there, Fortunately, this happened right beside the short route. I immediately changed my direction and started walking towards the short route, which was a narrow path. As soon as they noticed me taking a different route, they sped off. I was quite shaken up by this, especially by the fact that they sped off the very moment I took the short route. I'm not sure what they were planning to do with me, but considering the area looked pretty deserted and I'm lightweight, I would have been an easy target for abduction or something worse. Thanks to my obsession with true crime podcasts, I reacted quickly. Otherwise, I might not have been here to type this out. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. What if they were really lost and just wanted to ask for directions? Because I've had several people ask me that. Well, even if they wanted to ask for directions, they could have when I reached the back of the van because I was hardly a few meters away from them, but they chose to stare at me with a creepy smile instead. I'll never forget the way that they looked at me. It was as if a predator was eyeing its prey. This happened about 3 years ago. I was going to visit my family because it was my cousin's 12th birthday. I had moved to Virginia the year prior, and I was going to surprise my cousin because I hadn't seen her since I had moved. They live in Tennessee. Anyways, the drive was about 6.5 hours. Everything was going good for the first 2 hours of the trip. Then this car had started following me randomly. I left in the nighttime so that I could get there in the early morning. I had thought nothing of it for about 30 minutes to an hour. The car was on my ass the whole time. I had started to become worried. I pulled off at the nearest exit. I just really wanted to see if the guy got off on the exit as well. And guess what? He did. I had went into the gas station to go get some snacks and a drink. When I came out of the gas station, I saw the car parked kind of on the side of the building. I then quickly got in my car and got back on the highway. I saw the same car come up the exit ramp behind me. I was just starting to enter Tennessee, and he was still following me. I had decided to search up the nearest police station on my GPS. I got off on that exit, and the police station was about 2 miles up the little highway. When I pulled into the police station, he just kept driving down the road, just as I had expected. I went into the station and then filed a report. They then told me that I could go on my way. I ended up driving the rest of the 3 hours without any problem. When I finally got to my aunt and uncle's house, I told them what happened. They told me that they didn't like the area that I was living in at the time, and that it was a hotspot for human trafficking. Luckily, I didn't get trafficked, but every time I go back down there for the holidays, I always get nervous, even though I moved last year. My husband's son and I loved boating, kayaking, and really anything to do with the water. We also love to visit the state parks in Georgia. This particular park that we chose to visit said on the internet that it was centered around a preserved gristmill and sawmill covered bridge as well as a dam built in 1880. It said that the dam created a 412-acre lake with tea-stained pure water, which was home to stately cypress trees draped in Spanish moss and tupelo trees that touched the sky. The person at the visitor center said the cypress trees grow these things out called knees that grow above the roots. Their function is unknown, but they were everywhere, growing at different heights. They sort of make the lake look spooky or like a fairyland. They looked like a perfect place to take a canoe out into the water. After renting the large metal canoe, we climbed into it and headed out to explore the lake and see the exotic cypress trees growing like skyscrapers growing right out of the water. It felt like you're being transported back to a time nearly forgotten. While paddling, you can see beaver dams, alligators, venomous cottonmouth snakes, blue heron, as well as white ibis and other wading birds. After paddling to the far end of the lake, we decided we needed to head back before it got dark. We headed back somewhere in the middle of the lake, and we hit something. What the fuck? We could not go forward, and we could not go backward either. All we could do was spin, no matter how hard we paddled. Maybe if we rocked the boat. It was starting to get dark, and the mosquitoes were relentless. Who was going to jump into the water and maybe push the boat? Nobody. Not with venomous snakes and alligators out in the water. We decided to yell for help, but no one could hear us. It's now dark at this point. What was that splash? Was it an alligator? I guess the park is closing now, right? We thought to ourselves. Aren't they worried that a boat isn't back yet? Yes, we had life preservers, but alligators and cottonmouths could be waiting to attack. There was water at my feet. The freaking canoe was leaking, and we keep spinning and rocking. After spinning, rocking, and yelling for hours, suddenly the boat broke loose from whatever was holding us hostage. We paddled back as fast as we could before the canoe filled with water. We figured that with our combined weight of 525 pounds, the canoe skimmed over a cypress knee and the canoe fell down onto it and created a nice dent to create a big spinning top that eventually drilled a hole into the canoe. I really hope they got rid of those metal canoes. I never went on that water ever again. This happened back in 2015. I'm born and raised in Maine. My family and I decided that we wanted to finally move out of the state for a fresh new start and to meet some new people. We all agreed that we wanted to move to South Carolina as we found a good deal on a 3-bedroom house and a good-sized property. We packed up our things and started on our journey. Once we finally got to South Carolina, we started to unpack. Once we all got settled into our new home, my brother and I, Travis, got enrolled into Anor High School. On the first day of school, we were so nervous because the school was way bigger than any we'd ever been to. The first day of school wasn't so bad after we had made a few friends, and people enjoyed our company at the lunch table. On our bus ride home, we had made some plans to hang out with our new friends. They live in a big trailer park just down the road, so we said that we would meet them once we got our bags dropped off at our place. So after we dropped off our bags and told our mom where we were going, we started on our walk to the trailer park. As we were walking around the park looking for our friends, a black pickup truck was slowly creeping up beside us. Once we noticed this truck, we turned our heads to their direction, and they came to a complete stop. There were 2 guys and 1 girl sitting in the truck. They yelled out to us and then said,
Hey, y'all want to hang out? Let's go for a ride.
My brother and I looked at each other and looked back at them, then said, Yeah, sure, why not? So they told us to hop in the back, which we did. They then proceeded to take us down this dirt road that we've never been on. We were having a blast at first, until they started to speed up to an uncomfortable speed, making the truck fishtail with us on the back. I then looked at my brother with a scared expression on my face, and I thought at any minute they would flip the truck and our lives would be over. Thankfully, however, that didn't happen. The truck finally came to a complete stop. We then got out of the back of the pickup truck. They took us to a boat landing area where you can have fires, barbecues, and swim. The girl that was with the 2 guys had asked if we wanted to go swimming, but we declined since we didn't have any swimming clothes. She walked away after that, and it seemed like she was getting irritated with us for declining the offer to go swimming with her. So my brother and I walked to the back of the pickup truck to roll a blunt, just to feel good and kind of change our mood and to try and have a good time. After a couple of hours of smoking and hanging out, we told them we needed to go home now, as it's a school night and it was starting to get late. We asked them if they could give us a ride back home now since we were new to the area and that we didn't know our way back. They proceeded to tell us that no, and that we don't need to go home. As you can imagine, I started to get really freaked out at this point that they were up to something. And after asking them once more to take us back home and that our mom would be worried, they still declined and continued to just drink and smoke. My brother looked over to me and then just said, "Okay, since they don't want to take us home, we're gonna have to find our own way to get back home." So here we are now on our own, walking up the dirt road and trying to find our way out of here, when suddenly we hear their pickup truck start up and we could hear them driving our way at a fast speed like they were trying to catch us to do only God knows what. At the corner of my eye, I'd happened to notice a path that leads off the dirt road. As I look up the path, I noticed that it was a driveway that led up to a house. I looked over at my brother, then said, "Hurry, let's run up to that house and see if those people can help us." So in a panic, we ran up the driveway to the person's house. Me being scared, I told them that we needed the police to be called, and I then just explained the whole situation that we had been through. The nice gentleman agreed, as he was worried as well, and he then called the cops for us. The cops finally showed up after about 15 minutes. We then made our statements, and the police brought my brother and I home safely. So to the 3 reckless teenagers that wouldn't bring us home and scared the absolute life out of us, I pray and hope that we don't encounter any of you ever again. I'd like to start off by prefacing that my entire family has been known to see some pretty creepy and unexplainable things for as long as I can remember, and I'm not excluded from that ability. I'm currently a 24-year-old female, and my paranormal encounters go all the way back up to when I was around 5 years old, including hearing unclear apparitions or hearing noises that had no obvious explainable cause. I've also been interested in anything and everything horror, and have become pretty desensitized to scary things. Seeing gray figures peeking from behind my doors or a shadow man standing next to my bed didn't creep me out half as much as what just happened to me and my friend the other night. We're in the end of July here in South Georgia, and we've been having some pretty bipolar weather, but my best friend's niece was having a birthday party at one of our other friends' house since she had such an open yard and the rest of us didn't. This gave plenty of room for all the kids, ages ranging from 3 to 10, to run around in and be pretty secure. Now, the town where this is located is a pretty small, close-knit town. The absolute definition of everybody knows everybody, you know? So the friend who owns the house had moved in about a month ago, and she's had a few encounters with what we'll call the local druggies, like whispering at her at night while she's on the porch smoking and all. And I was even there for an event or two, but we would honestly just laugh it off because we knew we were safe and that the previous owner knew the guy doing all this, and the previous owner was also close to one of our other friends. See? Pretty close-knit. So the party happens and everyone leaves except for me. I decide to stick around and drink with my friend who owns the house, who we'll call C for the sake of this story. Well, since I was going to be drinking with C and let her vent about some things that she's been stressed out about lately, I decided to stay the night with her. It actually ended up being me, C, and her boyfriend, as well as one of his friends, and we were all just drinking and relaxing. A few hours go by, and it's around 11 p.m. at this point. Someone brings up using the buggy ATV to go riding dirt roads. But the idea is kind of blown off a little bit, considering that C has 4 kids inside asleep that we obviously just can't leave, even though this town is the kind of town that you can do that in. But I understand her concern though, especially with the encounters with the local druggies she's been having. At first, we weren't going to go riding at all, but then I brought up the idea that me and C can go riding first, and then when we get back, the guys can go. So that way 2 adults would still be at the house at any time. Everyone agrees, so me and C load up, me being the driver. Now, I didn't grow up in this town, and I've only ever really been there to go visit and stay the night with C. But we never really went exploring before, so with me driving, C had to navigate what dirt roads would be best to go on. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. 2 women riding around at almost midnight drunk and on dirt roads just sounds like a mixture for trouble. Well, in our defense, we all have Life 360, which for those of you who don't know, It's actually an app where you can track someone's location as long as they have their location turned on. So if we get stranded or lost, C's boyfriend would be able to locate us. So with that in mind, the ride started off pretty fun. We had to drive down an asphalt highway for about 10 minutes, going 25 miles per hour, because it seemed like that's what the buggy speed capped off at. We ended up racing a car to a dirt road we were planning on turning on, and then we were drifting in this dirt road. All harmless fun and all. Well, we get about 5 minutes down this dirt road, and the temperature light comes on, and the buggy feels like it's not wanting to go faster, like it's actually slowing down. C messages her boyfriend's friend because it's his ATV and asks if it's normal, to which he replies for us to just stop somewhere and let it cool down for a second, and then it should be fine. We ended up coming upon a few houses, and I didn't feel comfortable to keep going if the temperature light was going to keep coming on like that. We reached a dirt road that turned off to the left, and I then used it to make a U-turn to go back. Where we were, the front houses near us was an abandoned trailer, and about 2 houses that were further back on a large plot of land. I was planning on stopping there and letting the buggy cool down there since the yard had lights that could keep some illumination on us. But C suggested that we go away from the house since our headlights were pretty bright, and we had some music playing as well. And I doubt these people wanted to hear loud booming country rap at 11:30 at night. I ended up going about 2 more minutes up the dirt road and then stopping when there was nothing but trees surrounding us. Since there were no other lights other than the heat lightning around us, I decided to keep the ATV on, but just park or keep the headlights on. While waiting for the temperature light to go off, we began gossiping like females usually do without a care in the world. We were pretty content, not really needing to worry about our surroundings considering the closest house was at least a 15-minute walk away from us. The closest house being the ones far back on the large plot of land, and they were really far back. We were sitting around for about 5 minutes, no more than that, when I then see movement next to C. I couldn't really register what the hell I was seeing because it all happened way too quickly. I partly blame this for the alcohol that I had in my system, and it was a complete shock as well. But the bigger shock was when a bright flashlight turned on directly next to C, and then there was a man. Now, remember how I said in this town that everyone knows everybody? Well, this guy just randomly turned on this flashlight, scaring the absolute shit out of the both of us. But I personally didn't really freak out within the first few seconds because I thought maybe C had known this guy. But when I looked at his face and listened to his first words, my blood ran absolutely cold. Now, this man had to have been in his 50s or 60s, at least 6'4", and he had gray stringy straight hair that ended above his eyes, but turned into a mullet in the back. I remember vividly seeing him wearing the stereotypical overalls with no shirt, and he had a huge beer gut. But it was his smile that had me frozen. It was so eerily creepy. The only thing I can compare it to would be the character smile in the new horror movie Smile. And with the smile on his face, he said,
"You know, it's a bad thing to be broken down on the dirt roads this late at night."
And the way he said it with the creepy smile on his face, it was almost like he was content, or dare I say happy to think that 2 young females were broken down in the middle of nowhere so close to midnight. Neither one of us answered at first, me not thinking to because I thought that maybe C had known him, but she ends up telling him that we're not broke down and that we just overheated and that we were about to leave. I took that as my cue to put the ATV in high drive. When she answered, he looked at me, then right back at her with that same creepy ass smile, before then just saying,
"Well, all right, ladies. Y'all have a good night."
Then slowly walking toward the back of the ATV. At this point, the shock was still in my system, but my fight or flight took over, and I punched the gas, tearing out back to the house, forcing the ATV to go 40 miles per hour the entire way. Me and C start basically screaming at each other over the loud rev of the engine, asking each other things like, "Why would he just pop up on 2 females like that? Why did he wait to turn his flashlight on until he got right up on us? And why didn't we hear him walk up? And also, where the hell did he come from? All of these questions we couldn't think of any answers to. I was much more focused on getting us back to the house safely and in one piece, but also as quickly as humanly possible. We do make it back, and safely, and as soon as we return, we relay the entire encounter to the guys, telling them how a creepy man just popped up next to us, and how we have no idea where he came from because we were only sitting for not even 5 minutes, and if he had actually walked from one of those houses, it would have taken him around 15 minutes to get to us. But even then, how would he have seen us parked in the middle of the road when we were out of eyeshot from any houses? C had started making the scariest comments, saying how he could have been watching us from the trees, or that maybe he saw us turn around and then just took the opportunity to see if we were potential victims for him. Our imaginations were going wild because of how many questions we could not have logically answered without it being scary as hell either way. Now, C's boyfriend is a pretty big guy, and he's also protective as all get out when it comes to C and her kids. So in us telling the story to them, probably looking like we're having a mental breakdown as we tell them, he decides to get his friend and go back and see if they can confront this man who scared us so badly. We tell them the exact route that we took and where we turned around and where we parked at, and they loaded up and took off. Meanwhile, me and C were finally calming down from the initial shock, and we were stone cold sober at this point. We decided to try our best to get some sleep, because even if the guys didn't find the man, they're going to go their round of dirt road riding, so we didn't expect them to be back anytime soon. We would just get their story in the morning. I go into the living room and I lay down on the largest sectional C has, and I start scrolling through TikTok, just trying to see maybe some fake humor videos come across my feed to distract my brain from the fear that was still lingering. But as anyone does, I got sucked into the TikTok hole for close to 20 minutes. All of a sudden, C comes bursting in the living room, and she tells me that we need to get up and go with the guys back to the dirt road. I'm confused as hell at this point, so I ask, "Why? What did they find?" To which she then replied with, "It's what they didn't find. They found our buggy tracks, but they can't find any footprints." When I tell you I felt my heart drop into my ass, I mean it, because this man was a big man. He had to have left some kind of tracks, and the sands on the dirt roads are so soft not even a frog could hop across it without leaving tracks, much less a 260-pound fully grown man. So we think that maybe they didn't stop in the right spot, and we decided to go take them to the exact route that we took. We ended up waking her oldest son to keep an ear out on the two daughters, because it wasn't going to take us more than about 10 minutes, and we were locking every door and leaving him a phone just in case of an emergency. All four of us load up in C's boyfriend's truck, and we haul ass. We went the exact same route, then around and all, until we then stopped at the same exact spot that me and C had stopped at alone. Me and C get out of the truck, and she walks around 200 feet one way, and I walk 200 feet the other, both of us shining our flashlights looking for any sign of footprints. There's none. Where our buggy tracks were completely visible, there was no sign that anybody had even stepped foot on that road. Completely surprised and even more creeped out, all of us got back in the truck and started back to the house. I think the guys thought that we were playing some kind of joke on them or something, because they didn't really seem to believe us, but we told them that if it really was a joke, we would have told them that before leaving the house a second time, and that we wouldn't have left the kids alone at home, which we really wouldn't unless we absolutely felt the need to go find the missing footprints. The rest of the night went by pretty normal. We all just went back to the house, and me and C hit the sack again, both of us thinking that we may just be a bit crazy at this point. I know this story isn't scary like a lot of the other ones out there, but it's just the thoughts that are creepy. Was it a man who was trying to help us, thinking we broke down? If so, why did he wait last second to turn his light on? And why did he feel comfortable walking up to two females that late at night without saying a single word? But at the same time, where did he come from? And where's his footprints? I really feel like we either came across someone who was in the trees and had planned on doing some pretty brutal and scary things to us if things had gone his way, or was it something a little more supernatural? The first option seems much more believable, just based on how clear and vivid this man was. But I mean, who knows? Maybe this was the first ghost I've seen that wasn't just a fog or shadow figure, and that I just don't know how to wrap my head around it. At the end of the day, all I have to say is please be careful riding dirt roads late at night, especially if you're female, because you never know who or what may be watching you. The story happened a few years ago. I was 25 at the time, and I worked an overnight shift at McDonald's. Since I was the manager, I was the only one who could stay after midnight. I had dismissed the last 2 remaining employees. I had stayed behind to continue working my shift. I was completely alone. Nothing but the buzzing sound from the ice cream machine. When I heard the beep on my headset, I answered,
Hey, welcome to McDonald's. We're only taking cash at this time.
There was no answer. I then repeated my question, and again, no answer. I was in the office, so I looked up to the monitor to see a black SUV. I said again,
Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you?
And there still was no sound. Usually a drunk driver would come in through the drive-thru and fall asleep. I don't ever go outside after hours, so I just let him sit there. A few minutes go by, and I'm cleaning around the restaurant. It's been well over 20 minutes, and I come back to the office, and I notice that the black SUV is still sitting in the drive-thru. I click on the headset, and I call out, a bit more frustrated now.
Hey, are you gonna order? I can't have you just sitting there. Please order or leave.
I waited. Still nothing. At this point, it's just getting a little creepy. I walk out into the lobby into the play place, and I look through the glass doors to see the black SUV. I squinted my eyes trying to see inside the pitch black tinted windows. The lights are on, and it sounded like the truck was still running. I click on again in a very angry tone, and I yelled out,
Hey, you need to move now.
I then see the window roll down very slowly. I'm able to make out a man's silhouette. I then hear in a very low bass voice,
I'm sorry, baby. I must have fell asleep.
Is that you in the window? If you are going to order, you need to go ahead and move now.
I said.
Damn, why are you getting so aggressive?
He asked.
Sir, you've been sitting in my drive-thru for 45 minutes. You need to leave.
I shouted at him. He then replied back with,
I haven't even ordered yet.
I was so over it by that point that I just yelled at him to leave. He paused for what seemed like a really long time, then sang,
Hey, you really need to lower your voice.
Sir, please just leave.
I said, irritated. The man then sped off, and I sighed, thinking that would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. My nightmare was just beginning. I went back into the office, not really thinking too much of it anymore, when I then hear glass break. I jump up, and I immediately push the silent alarm. I locked myself in the office. Breathing really hard, I was checking the cameras, and I saw a large man. He wasn't fat, he was just really tall, about 6 to 7 feet tall, and had very broad shoulders. He looked like he had been in a fight. I then watched as he made his way all the way to the back. He had jiggled the door handle, and he was laughing.
So this is where you're hiding.
Sobbing, I was able to make out the words. I've called the police. They're on their way. I then crawled into the fetal position under the desk, crying and praying for this man to just leave.
Oh, come on! I just wanted to have some fun, baby! Open the door!
The man began banging on the door. It sounded like he was kicking it. The landline then rang, and I answered it. It was the police.
Hi, we We got an alert from inside the restaurant. Is there an emergency?
The operator asked. Yes, there is, I shouted. There's a man inside the restaurant. He's trying to kick down the door to the office. I gasped sharply for air as I tried to control my crying.
We have 2 officers approaching the scene now, ma'am. Please stay calm,
said the operator. In the distance, I could hear the 2 officers yelling at the man to put his hands up. Thank God for the silent alarms. Police! Miss, you can come out now, said one of the officers. I was so relieved that as soon as I opened the door, I saw the officer, and I then hugged him. I heard him chuckle and say, "Are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" I said no, and I just thanked him profusely for showing up so fast. They took my statement and then left, and I then locked up and went home. I quit that job the very next day. Never again will I work an overnight shift. Hell no. Back in 1982, there were a group of people called the Dixie Mafia, and some of the members had to sell some of their land to what I would imagine to cover court costs. Many ended up in jail for running liquor, and some even murder. One of the main members' land was subdivided into different sized lots. My husband and I purchased a 20-acre lot. We were kids, and this was very different and exciting for us. We had rabbits, chickens, and cows. We met all of our neighbors, and we had some get-togethers. The neighbor next to us only came out on the weekends. The first time we met him was when he came on our long driveway on a golf cart with his wife. He was a very obese man. I would guess weighing in at about 500 pounds. His wife was dressed in all black, kind of like an Amish woman. She never said a word. He was very personable, telling jokes, and knew a lot of history about the area. He said that when a member of the Dixie Mafia owned the land, that no one was allowed down the road that we now live on. We actually found an old whiskey still on a stream on our property. He invited us to come over to his property and to see his bunker. We were very interested in what he needed a bunker for. We went over and we got a tour of his bunker. It had a shower and a toilet, and he said it was for when the government came. That was all he had on the property. No house or barn. Later on, he had started bringing in all kinds of equipment, like tractors, backhoes, and bulldozers. I thought he was probably going to build a house. Then, we started hearing rifles and guns being shot every weekend. The cops showed up and they found out he was inviting members of the National Guard to his property to practice. Well, that's what he told the police. The police told him to stop immediately. Later on, he invited us over for a cookout. I was sitting at a picnic table and I had dropped my fork, and when I went under the table to get it, I saw that he had really short shorts on, and his junk was actually hanging out of them. I had later on told my husband about it. He said that the man was so obese he probably had no idea what was hanging out. One day I got a call, and the man had asked if I could come over and help him with something. I walked over, and I saw both of his legs hanging out from under his tractor. The tractor was running, so he didn't hear me approaching. He again had on his short shorts, and his junk was hanging out again. If he knew I was there, he never did say anything. I ran away as fast as I could. I went on to tell my husband that it was no accident, that he was definitely exposing himself on purpose. Later on, I had read in the local paper that a man with his exact name, a very common name, was caught sitting in a truck near an elementary school with no pants on. I had asked him if that was him, and he just laughed, saying no. One day when my husband would be going to work, he would start ringing my phone as soon as my husband would leave, and I would just let it ring for hours. I once looked out my kitchen window, and I saw him picking blueberries while naked. And then another time he had came to my house again when I was alone, and he brought over a duck. I was close enough to pet it, and he had actually tried to kiss me. I really wanted to tell my husband all about this, but he would have definitely tried to kill him. This man had actually owned a business as well. We read that it had burned down, and my husband heard at work that his friends had told him that he probably burned it down himself to get the insurance money, because his business was failing apparently. Next thing I know, he was sponsoring Boy Scout camps on his property. I thought that a man who walks around naked and exposes himself should definitely not be allowed to invite Boy Scouts to his property. So I called Boy Scouts main office, and then I called the police. The Boy Scouts actually sent me a letter saying that his property wasn't even approved for venue for scouting, and they shut him down. Next thing I know, the FBI's at our door telling us that this man was extremely dangerous. He had been convicted of arson in the past, and he was reported for exposing himself 30 times, but was never convicted. He was tricky like that. Let's fast forward a little bit. I was teaching some piano in the little town nearby. Well, one of my students said that her youth group from her Methodist church was going to go camping that weekend. And I asked where, and she said it was a campground on my road. I figured he was once again up to his old tricks. It was at this point where I just finally decided to just stay out of it, and me and my husband shortly moved away after that. After we had moved, there was a story on the news that they had found a body on the man's property, and that it had been burned beyond recognition. The news just said that it was probably a homeless person, but last time I checked, he was still living there when it happened. So who really knows? I don't know what that man's problem is. All I know is he's definitely sick in the head, and I really hope at some point he gets some help. He really needs it. I want to start off by saying that this is my mom's story, but I actually remember when it happened. I have several other stories of my own that I'll definitely submit to this channel one day, if anyone is interested in hearing them. All of this happened when I was around 4 to 5 years old. My mom and dad were going through a divorce, and they had lived in separate houses. My mom spent a lot of time with her best friend at the time, who we'll call Star for this story. I remember that me and my brother would have playdates with Star's 2 kids, and my mom and Star would browse through the computer. One day, Star had set up a profile for my mom on a dating website. This was back when dating websites were just becoming a thing, and you could only go through them on a computer. My mom wasn't really enthusiastic about having a dating profile. She was just going through a divorce with my dad at the time, and she wasn't interested in dating anyone so soon. Nevertheless, she let Star convince her to give it a try, and she did. About a week or so later, my mom and Star decided to have a girls' night out and go bar hopping, while my dad had me and my brother for the weekend. My mom and Star had a good time at the bar. They sang karaoke, danced, and talked. Just normal things people do at a bar. That is, until a man approached my mom and asked her to dance. My mom didn't really want to dance, but she didn't want to hurt the man's feelings. She figured since it wasn't a slow song playing, she wouldn't have to dance too close to the guy. So she then agreed to only one dance. She danced with the man and everything seemed normal afterwards. After the dance, she thanked him, and then she went back to the table that Star was sitting at, when the guy had followed her and then sat down in a chair right beside her at the same table. My mom and Star kind of just looked at each other, as if to say, "What the hell's this guy doing?" That's when my mom then asked him, "Can I help you?" The man then smiled at my mom, as if he were admiring a beautiful painting or something, then saying, "God, I love you." My mom then replied back with, "What? Excuse me?" To which he then replied to her with, "Your name's Vanessa, right?" My mom's eyes then got wide. She had never seen this man before in her life, and she didn't know how he knew her name. "How do you know my name?" she asked. "I know everything about you." As you can imagine, my mom began getting creeped out. The man then listed her full name, her phone number. He knew about me and my brother, and he even told her the address of the house that she just moved out of. He then said, I drove by your house, but I only saw a fat man washing his truck in the yard." The man he was describing was my dad, who was actually still living in our old house at the time. My mom really became creeped out at this point, but the icing on the cake was when the man told my mom that he saved all of her pictures to his computer, and he even set his home screen as a picture of her. Star then tapped my mom on the shoulder and then said, "Vanessa, I gotta use the bathroom. Do you need to go too?" As she then darted her eyes to the back of the bar, and my mom got the hint, then replying with, "Yeah, I really need to go too." They both then got up, and they told one of the bouncers all about the creep and his behavior. He then walked my mom and Star out of the back door of the bar, all the way to their car. My mom and Star then went back to Star's house and deleted the dating website profile that they had just made a week prior. She even changed her phone number since the guy said he knew her number. But the strangest thing was that they had never even put my mom's phone number, full name, or address or anything personal like that on the website at all. So how did that man know all that stuff about my mom? It's been nearly 20 years since all that happened, and my mom has never heard or saw that man again. It just goes to show you that there are many weirdos out there who can find out anything about you, and they can even stalk you with just a small click of a computer or phone. It's really scary. Stay safe out there, guys. I was in my mid-20s when this incident happened. I was staying in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It all started on a nice spring day. I took my 5-month-old daughter to the store in her stroller. I had put a pair of shoes on her, and they had a little pink bow on them. When I got home, I had noticed that my daughter's left shoe was missing. I had only paid like 50 cents for them at Payless, so I didn't really think too much of it, and I went on with my day uneventfully. The next morning at 7 a.m., a man had knocked at my door smiling, and he was holding my daughter's lost shoe. I thanked him, and I shut the door. That same night, I had heard a tapping on my bedroom window at around 3 a.m. The next morning, when my ex returned home from work, he found a large kitchen knife on the ledge of my ground floor apartment window right outside of my bedroom. We then left the apartment to go stay in a motel for a few nights. We left the motel and we went to do some apartment hunting, trying to find a new place to live. We found an apartment community that was seemingly very safe. Well, a few months after moving in, I see the very same man as before at a giant food market. I quickly paid for my groceries and then ran home as fast as possible. The next morning, when I had checked the mailbox, I found a note.
"I found you."
It read. I called the police, but they said that there was nothing they can do at this point since he's not actually harming me. Well, just a few days later after this event, something else happened. My ex found a Polaroid photo of me sleeping, and it was taken from outside of my bedroom window of our new apartment. The police were called yet again, and this time they had actually started to take it a bit more seriously. The police stayed outside my unit for 3 hours to see if anyone suspicious showed up. Nobody did though, so the police left. Once again, the next day there was a note taped to my door of my apartment. It read,
"I'll be back."
I decided to leave Lancaster for a little bit to go to Philadelphia where my family is. I did eventually return, and I haven't seen this man since, nor have I received any more of his weird notes. Still though, it's pretty damn creepy that this man went this far. When my friends and I were around 16, we used to walk around from the local movie theater to different fast food restaurants a few blocks away. One night, my friend Carly and I were walking back from McDonald's. We crossed the street and decided to follow the sidewalk alongside some of the apartment buildings that led back to the movie theater. It was about 9 p.m. and this area was completely isolated. As we were walking and talking, a man who seemed to be in his 40s passed us by going in the opposite direction and then turned into the apartments. We didn't think much of it and just kept on walking until I sensed someone behind me. When I turned around, I realized it was the same man who had just been walking in the opposite direction. I alerted Carly of what I thought was happening, but I tried not to jump to conclusions just yet. Maybe he forgot something. I looked back one more time, and the man completely froze in his tracks, with his hands by his side, like something out of a movie. At this point, Carly was freaking out and was just about to bolt when I then stopped her. I was afraid if we ran, he would start running after us, and I knew I wouldn't be able to outrun him. Instead, however, we power walked down the sidewalk and across the street, walking through a parking lot in a zigzag motion. We thought the coast was clear until we reached the theater entrance and saw the man from afar walking right towards us through the parking lot. We ran inside the movie theater, and Carly told one of her friends who worked there what was happening. They let us go into the area past the ticket booth to wait for our ride, and for that, I will forever be thankful. I'm not really sure what would have happened if we wouldn't have made it back to the populated area, but thank God we did. Who the hell knows what that guy had planned for us? I'm a guy, and I was 19 when this happened. I was fresh out of high school, and I just bought and moved into my own house. My house is in a trailer park, since they're way cheaper than regular houses. Well, this happened on one late night in particular. I was in my house just watching TV and minding my own business. It was about 1:30 in the morning. I heard a very loud boom come from the neighbor's house next door. It sounded like a bomb went off. It shook my whole house, and I went to look out the window to see what happened. The neighbor's house was on fire, and there were pieces of some of their house scattered in my backyard. It was like an explosion happened. Just as I had closed my blinds, I grabbed my phone to call 911. When I was talking to the 911 operator, there was another explosion in the neighbor's house that was just as loud, and it shook my house again. I told the operator that there had been a second explosion in my neighbor's house, and I gave her the address. She said that they'd send help right away. As I looked out the window again, I saw that the fire was starting to spread all around the neighbor's house. I then immediately got out of my own house since I was getting worried that the fire was going to spread to my house as well. When I got outside, people were crowded around the area from a safe distance away, while some others evacuated since the fire was getting really bad. When the police and fire crews arrived on the scene 10 minutes later, the neighbor's house was completely smothered in flames, as in the entire house was completely covered in fire, and it actually ended up spreading to the other house next to it, which thankfully wasn't mine. The fire was under control within an hour and a half, and the first responders were on the scene for an extra 3 hours, just to make sure that everyone was all right, and to also make sure that the fire didn't reignite, which thankfully it didn't. My house wasn't burned, which I was glad about. However, the siding on the entire backside of my house was completely melted off from the intense heat. Luckily, I didn't have to pay for the repairs myself since my house insurance covered it. The 2 houses that caught fire, though, were a total loss. The one where the fire started was totally gutted, and the house where the fire spread to, about half of it was burned. Those 2 houses were torn down 3 months later, and they had 2 new ones put in. If you're wondering, the people in the 2 houses that caught fire weren't home at the time. I ended up finding out what actually happened. As it turns out, the cause of the first explosion was actually from an oven that was accidentally left on when nobody was there, which then caused a gas buildup since the oven ignition was defective, and it also set fire to the car in the garage, which caused the car to blow up too. I'm just glad that my own house wasn't burned, and that the siding on the back was repaired. I really hope that the owners of those houses are doing better at their new homes. I'm also glad that they didn't have to see their own homes go up in flames. My name is Jerry. I'm 28 years old, but this horror happened back in 2013. I live in the outskirts of Boston. Back in 2013, I was 17 years of age, and at this time, I recently had my driver's license in my first car, which was an early 2000s Hyundai. In the middle of January 2013, me and my brother, who I'll refer to as Carl, decided to go on a road trip one weekend to visit our cousins in another town that was 2 hours away. The road trip went well, and we had a great time with our relatives until it was late at night and time for us to go back home. On the way back home at around 11 p.m., my car unfortunately needed a refill. I didn't look forward to stopping over at a gas station at this hour, but I had no choice. I drove around to look for a gas station until I found a poorly lit gas station on the side of a random street. Now, my brother Carl wasn't too happy about it. "This literally looks like a horror movie setting. You really want to stop here? You can drive a little bit further and find another gas station. This little 4-cylinder won't run out of gas." I replied back with, "Dude, you're such a baby. I'm almost on empty. I'm gonna add some gas and I'm gonna see if I can find another one. Just hang tight." While I was filling up my gas, another car shows up, which was a black 2-door BMW. A guy who's about 6 foot tall with long dark hair stepped out and walked up to me. He then asked me,
"Excuse me, sir. Do you have some gears?"
What do you mean by that?" I replied back.
"Oh, well, I mean, do you have some crack on you?"
No, I don't do crack," I said back. This guy really gave me the creeps. After I told him that I didn't have any crack on me, he then stared at me with a blank facial expression, not saying anything. As I finished pumping my gas, all of a sudden he grabbed me by the neck and then pinned me against my car. I was struggling. My brother got out of the car and luckily he had a baton, so he hit the man in the back. The man then started screaming. My brother then told me to get in the passenger seat and he'll take the wheel. I then quickly got into the passenger seat with my brother taking over and then floored it out of there. But it wasn't over quite yet. My brother put the pedal to the metal, but the maniac was catching up. Our busted up Hyundai couldn't outrun the crazy guy's inline 6-cylinder BMW. The maniac managed to get in front of us and then stopped to block us in. My brother then put the car in reverse, but the man got out of the car and started charging at us with a knife. But my brother made another good split decision. He floored the car and then actually ran the man over, and he took out the BMW's open door in the process. The guy was now on the ground screaming in pain, and we got the hell out of there. No, we didn't just do a hit and run, we just had to get out of there in the moment. We drove to the police station to report the incident, and luckily my brother actually remembered his license plate. However, the police later informed us that the BMW was stolen, and as far as I know, the man's still out there. My brother and I never told our parents the story because we didn't feel the need to. I now live by myself and I'm in a much better place financially, but I'm very grateful to my brother for saving our lives that night. That incident was traumatic, but it actually brought me and my brother closer. My brother's a hero, and I'll forever be thankful to him for saving our lives that night. I'm a 20-year-old female who lives in a very large American city. I won't say where, but I moved there for college when I was 18. The story happened during the summer months. I wasn't going home for the summer because I had a part-time job, but I planned to continue working over summer to get more money. I'm lucky to have an aunt who lives in this area, so I was staying with her temporarily before college began again. And my parents are only a 6-hour drive away, so I could visit back home on the weekends. This all occurred during the summer that had just passed. I worked at a hotel, and my shifts varied that summer from morning to mid-afternoon to later in the evenings. It was a Sunday night, and I had to work until 10 p.m. I didn't have a car, and neither did my aunt. However, I felt confident taking the bus, and I never ran into any trouble. That is, until that night. The bus came and I got on. No issues. It was very quiet, and there was about 7 people on the bus, including me. I sat near the front so that I could see better through the darkness, because the journey took about 25 to 30 minutes. There was a woman sitting 2 rows in front of me, but I didn't pay attention to her when I got on. I pulled my phone out to text my aunt, letting her know I was on the bus safely and that I'd be home soon. I also texted my parents to let them know that I was on my way home because they worried about me a lot when I was on a late shift, and they insisted on knowing I was home safe. I was just staring out the window for the first 5 minutes. Someone got off, and the woman in front of me had really caught my eye. She appeared to be swaying backwards and forwards, but I decided to ignore her. However, she turned around and started staring at me. I kept looking out the window, but I felt really creeped out when she just kept staring at me. I didn't dare move my eyes because I didn't want to engage her. She asked me if I needed hand sanitizer. I was taken aback by this, and I just shook my head before then saying, "No thank you." Living in a city, I knew to never be too polite to strangers, whilst at the same time not seeming too rude. I hoped she would turn back around, but to my horror, she got up and moved to the seat right in front of me. I kept staring out the window, trying not to show my emotions on my face. The bus was in front-facing rows, and the lady positioned herself so that her legs were on the seat next to her, and she could look at me more. I continued ignoring her, and she just stared ahead out the window, but I could see her looking at me occasionally from the corner of her eye. She just kept opening her hand sanitizer and rubbing it on her hands. I thought it was strange, but I didn't say anything. She suddenly jolted upwards, and I couldn't help but look directly at her. She turned to me and smiled, and I realized that she had dropped her hand sanitizer and that it had poured into her legs. I didn't say or do anything. She started giggling, and it really unnerved me because she was at least 40 years old and she was giggling like a schoolgirl. Still, I continued to ignore her. When she put her head down, I glanced behind me, and I had then made eye contact with some blonde guy a few rows behind me. He looked like he was trying really hard not to laugh, and seeing him so chill made me feel a little calmer. I then turned back and I looked at my phone. At this point, I had been on the bus for like 15 minutes, so I knew I didn't have too much longer to go. The woman in front of me was still rubbing her hands in the hand sanitizer. I could hear the squelching sounds, but again, I just kept ignoring her. She then started pouring the hand sanitizer on the floor and then giggling once more. I couldn't help but pull a face, but I don't think she saw me. The bus driver either didn't notice or he was choosing to follow my strategy, which was to ignore her. After pouring the liquid on the floor, she turned to me again and asked me randomly if I was a local. I hesitated, but I decided I could say yes without telling her where I lived. Well, she then asked me where I lived, and I refused to tell her, saying, "I really don't think it's an appropriate question to ask a stranger." I then took my phone from my lap, and I went to text my aunt about what was happening. Before I could even type anything, the woman said, "Hey!" and started waving the hand sanitizer over me. It was pretty much empty at this point, but I had felt some droplets hit my head. I shot up and then glared at her. I told her to stop, and she just stared at me. She then asked, "Hey, what stop are you getting off at?" I again told her that this wasn't an appropriate question, and I warned her that if she didn't leave me alone, I would inform the bus driver. She stared at me dumbfounded, but didn't say anything else. I texted my aunt and I told her all about this creepy ass woman, and I requested that she run down the bus stop to meet me when I got off. It was less than 5 minutes from her house at this point, and she of course agreed. She always waited up for me to get home. I felt very angry. I'd had a crap day at work, and this was the last thing that I needed right now. My aunt was asking me what was going on, and I was trying to text her back when the woman in front of me started bothering me yet again. "Who are you texting?" she asked me, still rubbing her hands. I decided to just ignore her, and I didn't even bother to respond. However, I again felt droplets hitting my head, and I realized that she was trying to pour more sanitizer on my head. I then shot up and said angrily, "I've already told you once to stop doing that. I won't be telling you again." She just started giggling and rocking forward again. I decided to move seats at this point, going right to the front so that she was behind me. I could hear her muttering to herself, still hearing her messing around with the now presumably completely empty bottle of hand sanitizer. I tried my best to ignore her, and I texted my aunt, letting her know everything. She told me to call her, but I was really scared doing that would further escalate the situation, which I explained. She told me she was at the stop waiting for my bus to pull in. When it was time for me to get off, I stood up, and to my absolute horror, so did the strange woman. I heard shuffling, and I turned around to face her. I was so annoyed and frightened by this point that I turned to the driver, and I told him this lady had been bothering me and was now trying to get off at the same stop as me, and that I really didn't think it was a coincidence. He told me to just get off the bus quickly and to not worry. I felt like he was being dismissive, which made me start to panic. What would happen if this woman got off and actually followed me and my aunt home? We'd have to call the police and attempt to run to our house without her catching up, but then she'd still know where we lived. I was thinking all of this when my stop arrived, and I then darted off the bus to my aunt. When I looked back, the driver had shut the doors, and I could see that the lady looked furious and was turning towards the driver as the bus sped away. The driver hadn't been dismissive after all, and he clearly had a plan. I was so relieved to be away from that woman, and I told my aunt everything as we walked back to the house. I called my parents when I got home, and I relayed everything to them. My dad told me that I shouldn't work a late night shift again, just in case that woman got on the bus and tried to find me. Since she saw where I got off, I was really nervous about leaving the house at all, in case she came back and roamed the surrounding area looking for me. But I obviously couldn't just become a hermit. I worried that she'd recognize my aunt too, but my aunt told me not to worry too much. I ended up requesting to stop the late night shifts, but my boss said no. She said that I could arrange a lift for myself and avoid taking the bus. So yeah, every night that I have a late shift, I had to fork out money to book an Uber for when I finished. I wasn't very happy about that, but I couldn't walk out on this job because they were really good about me being a student. And honestly, it took me over a year to even find a job in the first place, so I couldn't screw it up. I'm honestly still pissed at my manager, but it's not like I'll be stuck at this job forever. It's just until I graduate, which is actually approaching sooner rather than later. I feel like I did everything right, with telling people I was on the bus and having people who wait on me to actually get home, ignoring the woman and not being too polite to her and move away, as well as telling the driver, but I still had this encounter. If it wasn't for the bus driver thinking on his toes, I don't know what would have happened. That weird woman would have got off with me, and who knows what she would have done to me and my aunt. It's really not worth thinking about, but I can't help it. I will never get on a bus late at night ever again, and every paycheck goes towards saving for a car for when I graduate. For privacy reasons, I'll be changing some of the details of this story. I would like to start off by saying that my family is pretty messed up. I have 2 uncles who are both heavy drug users who've been in and out of jail for as long as I can remember. This all happened when I was 10 years old. It was summer, and I was staying in my uncle's girlfriend Miranda's house with her and my uncle Craig in the state over for mine. I really loved Miranda, and I developed a deep bond with her, so my mom let me stay with her whenever I could. Everything was going really great. Miranda was always taking me and my cousin swimming, to the zoo, the park, etc., as well as making really nice meals at night. My cousins and I got to stay up late watching TV and playing on Miranda's laptop, and it was just overall a really fun summer. At some point during the summer, my other uncle Paul came to stay at Miranda and Craig's house because he was fighting with his wife, my Aunt Sarah. Sarah was also a heavy drug user, but I didn't know her that well. For a few weeks, everything really continued to be awesome. My cousins and I had a lot of fun every day, even when all of the adults were at work. We would play outside, watch TV, eat snacks, and also swim in the neighborhood pool, amongst many other things. However, one day while Miranda, Craig, and Paul were all out of the house, something horrible happened. Inside the house was me, who was 10 years old, my cousins, one who was also 10, Madison, and the others being 8, 7, 5, and 2 years old. Me and the other 10-year-old were in charge, though in hindsight, we weren't really old enough to be in charge of that many young kids. We spent a lot of our time outside, but we happened to be spending some time indoors cooling off when there was a loud banging on the door. I looked through the peephole, and I saw Paul's wife Sarah standing there looking absolutely insane with a massive kitchen knife. She had the most angry out of it look on her face. She banged on the door without stopping, screaming that she knew Paul was there and that he had another woman hiding there. My younger cousins all began to freak out and scream and cry. After checking that the door was locked, me and Madison immediately began trying to calm down the other young kids so that Sarah wouldn't hear. We instinctively moved to the other end of the house as far away from the front door as possible, which was Miranda and Craig's bedroom. Luckily, I did have a cell phone at the time, so I texted Miranda and my mom to tell them what was happening. Miranda immediately texted me that she was calling the cops and that she was on her way home. As me and my cousin sat in the floor of the bedroom crying and freaking out and waiting for Miranda and the cops, Sarah began walking around to all of the windows and banging on them, saying that she knew someone was home and demanding to be let in. This went on for about 20 minutes straight. The whole time we were all just sobbing, and I couldn't stop thinking things like, what if she gets inside and kills all of us? How can I protect my little cousins? What if we have to sneak out of a window? Can we hide under the bed or in the closet? My heart was pounding, and time felt like it wasn't even moving at all. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only really like 20 minutes, I then heard the sirens outside. However, none of us actually moved until Miranda came home and opened the door just a few minutes after the police arrived. Sarah was arrested, and for whatever reason, so was my Uncle Paul, who got there around the same time as the cops. My best guess is an outstanding warrant. I remember just sitting there and watching him get arrested and being way too young to understand anything. My mom came and got me that day, even though it was an 8-hour drive. My cousins and I still talk about that day and just how traumatizing it was for all of us. But the story is only one of the many things my family's put us all through. I'm just really glad that we all turned out pretty decent, despite everything we went through. I was up until around 3 a.m. at night, and I had received a strange call from an unknown number. I shrugged it off since the week before I had bought a new phone, and I just thought nothing of it. He kept calling over the next few days though at the exact same time of night. Eventually I gave in, and I had picked up the phone. The person on the other end of the phone had warned me of a person watching me every night through the window. I didn't recognize the voice of the caller, and even if it was somebody I knew messing with me, I was way too tired to recognize their voice, therefore leading to me just shrugging it off since I didn't actually believe there was somebody watching me. A couple of days later, after returning home from work, I had saw a black van parked in a very strange spot not too far away from where I live. The reason I thought it was weird though was because anybody who looked through the windows of the van could possibly peer into my bathroom without me even noticing. At the time, I thought nothing of it since again, I was way too tired to actually care. 2 nights later though, I received a phone call, and the person on the other end then said,
"The very memory of my face will cause a manifestation of my being in the future. You will be asleep in bed, and I'll be there watching over you. When you wake up, you will not be able to move any part of your body. When the doctors eventually find you, they will not see me, but you will, and I'll see you too. Forever I'll see you."
After that very strange call, I decided to go to the police and ask them if they knew anything about strange calls around town. The police said nobody but me had reported strange calls from an unknown number. After that, I decided to move out, as I didn't want to risk my own life at that point, whether it was a prank call or not. I just didn't want to risk it. Okay, so this was a long time ago when I was quite young. I'm 21 now and I must have been around 11 at the time. This event that took place was so traumatizing that I actually thought it was a nightmare that I had as a kid until I recently found out that it actually happened. My mom had told me a bit more details on this story, and I thought it would be a cool one to share. So here goes. This took place about 10 years ago in the UK. One of my older cousins, I'll call him James for privacy reasons, had just passed his driving test, so he was maybe about 18 at the time. James and his family were quite well off, so he had this big black pickup truck that was open at the back. Now, he's always been a bit on the daring side, so when he got told by a few of his mates that people had reportedly seen an odd woman in a cream nightgown wandering the country roads late at night, well, James wanted to go out and look for her, thinking how funny it would be if we actually found her. He also thought that it was bullshit at the same time though. Bear in mind, it's not the kind of place anyone would typically walk, as there was nothing along those roads. I mean, no pathways, no houses, no barns, nothing. Just empty country lanes surrounded by trees, fields, and bushes. There was nada for miles. Now, this woman was said to be walking along these empty roads, and she was all by herself, not even walking a dog or anything like that, just alone late at night. So anyways, James said he was going to go look for her, and he asked who wanted to come. So me being stupid and thinking I was tough, I said yeah. So did one of my other cousins. We'll call her Sarah. She was about 6 months older than me, so we were pretty similar in age. My mom didn't like the thought of me going, so she came too. She's very young at heart as well, so she was down for anything. So anyways, all 4 of us piled into James' pickup, him driving, my mom riding shotgun, with Sarah and I sat in the open part at the back of the pickup. I'd say we were out on the back roads for about 30 minutes before we came to the road that she was meant to be on. All of a sudden, we heard James shouting. Now, I can't remember what he said, but I'd imagine it had something to do with the woman, as we did end up finding her. Sarah and I stayed really quiet while James drove past and stopped the truck. The woman almost looked drunk. She was messy and dirty, and she was walking weirdly. James and my mom were looking at the windows, whispering to one another, probably thinking, what the hell is this woman doing out here at this time? Now, Sarah and I are still kind of hidden, peeking over, looking at this woman staggering towards us, when out of nowhere, she starts sprinting towards the truck. Sarah and I start screaming, shouting, and then crying out of pure terror. James then floors it down the road to get us out of there. All 4 of us were in complete shock, and I didn't say anything on the way back. I don't really remember much after that, and I never really found out what happened to that woman. I haven't seen James in a very long time, but I probably will soon, so I'm going to ask him about it, as I'm sure he'll know, so I'll be able to give you an update and probably more details. But yeah, I really dread to think about what would have happened if she had actually caught up to the truck. So the story occurred the day after Father's Day of 2022, and after putting off writing it for some time, I finally decided to sit down, finish my incomplete draft, and share this experience with you all. Now, this may not be the most terrifying story out there. However, it was definitely an unsettling encounter for sure. My sister, who's a few years older than I, is known to go out with her friends, and she tends to stay out pretty late. We're talking past midnight to about 2 a.m. like 90% of the time, and this night in particular was no different. I hopped into bed and drifted off to sleep between 10:30 and 11:30 p.m., and I'm guessing sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of our family dog Princeton, a little Maltese Shih Tzu mix, barking at the front door, where you could hear my sister's keys jingling as she was unlocking it. Not too long after, I eventually passed out. I then suddenly awoke once more to the doorbell ringing repeatedly. At this point, I was in a total daze and very perplexed as to what was going on. One minute I was in a deep slumber, and the next second, in my groggy and slightly agitated state of mind, I was trying to figure out why the hell the doorbell was going off like that. For a moment, my brain dismissed it to my sister coming home and just forgetting her keys. But wait, she was already home by now, and I had heard her come in through the door a while ago. Okay, so then who was actually at the door at 3 a.m.? After it kept going for another minute or so, I had heard my mom storming down the hall with our anxious dog scrambling to get to the door. I poked my head out of my bedroom to see who it was, but before she was close to opening it, she stopped and she felt something was off about the situation. My sister, through her bedroom door open, was also very irritated and then paused to look at me standing at my door, confirming to herself that I too wasn't the culprit. Mind you, all of our bedrooms are upstairs, and so are the speakers for the doorbell. It literally comes from the hallway, so you absolutely can't miss it. She asked who was at the door, to which my mom just responded back with, "I don't know." She then scooped up our dog and then quietly ran back down the hall to the master bedroom where the windows face the front of the house. She was checking to see if it was my dad, who may have forgotten something, and then turned back around to grab it. He just left for work, but his car wasn't in sight. Footsteps could be heard running up and down the stairs that led up to a tiny porch where the front door is located at. So picture this. You hear frantic ringing of the doorbell, no knocking or pounding at the actual door, a few pauses and more ringing, and then a few more pauses. Then you hear someone running down the stairs, a pause, footsteps running back up the stairs, and it's just this cycle for about 5 to 10 minutes straight. Pretty weird, right? I was instructed to bring myself and my senior cat Shushu in the front room where my mom and sister were huddled at, still trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Don't worry, my sister still called 911 to report what was happening. They were also on the phone with my dad, who had full view and access to the security cameras at our house. He told us that there was an Asian female outside running up our steps to peer at our doorbell, to perhaps check if we had one of those Ring doorbells with a camera embedded into it, which we actually don't have. But then she rang our doorbell frantically as if she needed help. But the thing is, we weren't aware until my dad pointed out in the footage that he showed us was this woman laying flat out on our front porch as if she was waiting for someone to open up. Perhaps to truly appear as though she needed assistance and wasn't feeling well, or maybe she was readying for a possible attack. Then she ran down our stairs to then come right back up to it to do it again. I know, really odd. At first, we weren't really sure if she actually needed help, but after viewing the cameras, it was clearly obvious she didn't and had other intentions in mind. I mean, our neighborhood is fairly safe, and nothing like that had ever occurred as far as we were all aware. And the fact that she didn't go out of her way to also knock or pound at the door, or even yell out an urgency or go to a neighboring house for help was very off, at least to me. You could see her holding her phone too, and funny enough, my dad had just pulled out of the driveway to head off to work and saw a suspicious figure dressed in all black walking from a dark corner of the street towards our home. In my dad's proper fashion, he turned right back around and kept pulling in and reversing out of our driveway in his fatherly attempt to scare off this strange woman. I suppose that he didn't want to risk confronting her himself since he didn't know what possible weapon she could have had on hand. So thanks, Dad. For some reason that I'm still not sure of to this day is that out of all the houses in my neighborhood, we were targeted. Eventually though, she did fortunately give up and then walk away. But my mom made sure to watch her through the windows in the house to see where she went. And lo and behold, from our back sliding glass door, my mom could spot her getting into a car that was waiting in the shadows where there was no street lights. And there was also someone who was already in the vehicle who was most likely the getaway driver. Then they drove off with our possible crook that we almost had a close call with. I don't know what they had planned, but thank God it didn't work out. The story takes place a week before Halloween 2022. My group of friends at the time were really into the whole party scene, so I of course joined them whenever someone was throwing. The week before Halloween, my friend was hosting a Halloween party at an Airbnb that she had rented with the other hosts. Since my friend group and host friend knew each other, it was pretty easy for all 8 of us to get on the list of this exclusive party. Here's some background on where the house party was. Now, I live in Colorado, and if you're from here, you might know that Aurora is more on the high crime rate side. The house was the only house at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a huge wooden gate surrounding the whole place, meaning there was only one way in, one way out. The house has the whole front side of the house covered in windows. Anyway, with that out of the way, it's time to get down to what happened. We drove around the party around 10 after the pregame, and when we arrived, we parked right in front of the house. Everything was normal. Everyone was dancing, taking shots, and just getting loose. At about 1 a.m., I had the urge to use the restroom, so I tapped on the shoulder of one of my 8 friends I was around, and I asked him to accompany me to the restroom. We agreed, and we both went to the other end of the house to get in line for the bathroom. When it was our turn to use the restroom, my friend said that he really needed to go. Seeing as I wasn't in an urgent state, I let him go first. About a minute or 2 into him being in the bathroom, I was shaken out of my slight haze when I heard the haunting sounds of loud gunshots, followed with screams coming from the front end of the house. I banged on the bathroom door trying to urgently get my friend to come out so we could leave together, but he never opened the door. I felt as if time was running out as I had heard the gunshots get closer and closer behind me. I then made the decision to bring everyone who was in line behind me with me into a room to the right of the bathroom. About 5 of us rushed in, slamming the door behind us. I tried running to the window, but I was then stopped by someone telling me that they're shooting from outside. I then retreated helplessly into the closet of the room. I laid my head on my knees praying for a safe return home as I then heard the faint gunshots and screams from the other side of the wall. After what felt like hours, silence fell over the whole house. It was time to get the fuck out before it was too late. I got up out of the closet and then made my way outside to the hallway. I ran to the front door, seeing my friend, the host, holding down the front door. She yelled at everyone to leave through the back, and that's when I found another one of my 8 friends who I came with. We both ran out back, and we had to run towards the front as there was no back exit. Turning to the corner leading to the front, I then saw a horrific scene. I quickly looked at the front to see the whole glass wall shattered, and then quickly looked at the dying kid in front of the driveway with his girlfriend screaming for him. I was in shock. All I could do was run. By the time we tried leaving, the cops had blocked off the entrance to the cul-de-sac. We had no option but to stay and be questioned. We waited outside in the brisk October air until about 4 a.m. when we were then transported in a prison bus. I later found out that a car had pulled up in front of the house and men in Halloween masks had rolled down their windows and started randomly shooting at the window's wall. We were held until 11:30 a.m. the following morning. I went home thinking of the man who was bleeding out to death in the entrance to the house. I'm very grateful that all of my friends who were in the front when it all happened are all safe and well. I haven't been able to go to house parties since, and we've all grown distance from each other since. Seriously, everyone, it's very important to be aware of not only what's around you, but who's around you. Please be careful. So this just happened to me today. I'm submitting this story while it's still fresh in my mind and before I get too busy to do so. So this is more of a creepy, unexplainable story than anything else. This happened this morning around 6:30 a.m. Before I continue with this story though, there's a few things that I need to explain. For one, I'm a 19-year-old female living with my mom and little sister. My mom always wakes up at 3:30 a.m. for work, and she normally leaves between 4:30 a.m. and 4:40 a.m. because her job is only 15 minutes away. Also, if anyone is wondering what I was doing up so late, it's because I used to work third shift at Sheetz, which is a gas station. So I'm used to staying up all night until the early mornings. Another thing I want to mention is about our front door. Well, my room is right next to the living room where the front door is, and our front door is pretty heavy. So whenever someone goes in or out, even if I'm listening to loud music with headphones, I can still feel the vibration of the door being closed or opened. And last but not least, I can say that I stay in a decent neighborhood. No one bothers anyone around here. We generally stay to ourselves and we've been living here for about 5 years with no incidents. Now on with the story. As I mentioned before, this happened around 6:30 a.m. I was on my laptop listening to music, which wasn't that loud by the way, and I was pretty much just relaxing, when all of a sudden I felt and heard the front door close. Now this caught me off guard because after my mom leaves for work, neither I or my little sister leaves the house just to be safe. I called my sister and I asked her if she left, but she said no, and she was wondering why I asked. I told her because I heard the front door close, so I was just wondering. She said that she heard it too and she thought it was just our mom coming back or me leaving. Although I was still confused, I just said okay and hung up. Now I was really confused as to what was going on, but before I could finish thinking, I had heard my mom's phone go off as if she got a notification. For some reason, my mom always keeps her phone sound very loud, so if someone calls or she gets a notification, it's very loud, and annoying sometimes too. She also has this distinct notification sound that she gets whenever she gets a notification, so it was no mistake that it was her phone that I heard. So I thought, okay, let me go ask my mom what she's doing back home already. But before I did, I had decided to check and see if her car was outside. Since my room is in the front of the house, I can see her car out front if she's home. But when I went to look out my blinds, her car wasn't there. And I froze once again, just confused, not knowing what was going on. But as I turned to sit back down and at the bottom of my door, I could see a dark shadow of a person's feet standing by my door, and I literally felt my heart drop, and I froze right there for a moment just staring, too scared to move or even say anything. If this was my mom, she wouldn't just be standing there for no reason. She would knock or say something. But instinctively, I then said, Ma? No reply though. Nothing. That's when my heart then started racing, and I grabbed my phone from my bed and tried to call my mom. But I didn't get an answer, and I didn't hear her phone ring either. So I then texted her and asked her, Ma, did you come home? I had heard the door close and I heard your phone go off. As soon as I hit send, I looked up again, and the shadow was now gone. I kinda just sat there, heart racing, totally confused, but I definitely wasn't about to go out there to see who was there. All I had to protect myself in my room was a hammer, a kitchen knife, and a taser. But I mean, I still didn't want to risk going out there. After some time of just thinking and sitting in bed, which felt like a while, but was only about 30 minutes later, my mom replies and then says,
"No, honey, that's not my phone. I have my phone with me. I never came home. Is everything okay?"
Once again, my heart dropped because I know what I heard, and I heard her phone and heard the door close. I didn't respond right away. I just decided to call 911 and explain my situation and explain that I thought that someone was in my house. I stayed on the phone with the operator until the police came. I was explaining to the operator that my little sister was home too, and she advised me to stay where I'm at and to text my sister and to tell her the same thing, because if someone was in my home, there's no telling where they were. The response time here isn't that long because I stay less than 5 minutes away from the police station, so they showed up pretty quickly. And with the operator reassuring me that it was really them and that if I felt safe enough, I could open the door. And with that, I grabbed my kitchen knife and then slowly walked to my door, quietly unlocking it and opening it. Once I opened it, they then came in and I explained the situation to them as well. They checked my mom's room, reassuring me that no one was there and that my back and side door was locked, so were all my windows. They also said that it didn't look like there was any sign of forced entry whatsoever. Although I was still freaked out, I thanked them, and they said they would have an officer cruise around my neighborhood for a while just in case. After this, my little sister was freaked out as well. I'm not really sure what happened, or as to why I heard my mom's phone go off, or what I saw at the door, but it still freaks me out. Could my mom have accidentally left the door unlocked and someone just walked in? And if so, how did they leave? Did they lock the door behind them when they left? And why didn't I hear their footsteps? I'm still left with no answers. And if it wasn't for my sister also telling me she heard the front door close, I would honestly think that maybe I was just imagining this whole situation. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I really hope everyone stays safe out there.